Chapter 1440. From today onwards, Sun Luo will be established. It seemed to be announcing something, but it also seemed to be declaring something. Then, the black stone tablet sank slowly and finally disappeared. Even with the three rulers' cultivation base, they could not sense where the stone tablet had gone. It was at this time that Yun Yang's silhouette came through the air and saw Dongfang Haoren and the others. What happened? Dongfang Haoren's expression was solemn as he explained, "This is extremely strange. I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse. From today onwards, Sun Luo will be established." Yun Yang's brows furrowed slightly before relaxing. He smiled and said, "It's not a small matter indeed. But for humans, it's a good thing, a very good thing." Good thing? A very good thing. Dongfang Haoren and the others were puzzled. Yun Yang guffawed but did not offer any explanation. He took to the air and disappeared in the blink of an eye. B** explain clearly. The three rulers were furious and chased after him. F** King Hell, we've always been the ones keeping others in suspense. Today, we're the ones being kept in suspense. We can't stand it. That stone tablet is strange. It's fine if it disappeared without a trace. Yin Yang, even if you've advanced to saint level, do you think you can play tricks and disappear in front of the three of us? The three rulers were experienced masters. Although Yin Yang had reached the same level, he was too new to be able to shake off the three of them. It was a pity that he did not get any answers even when they chased him all the way to the Palace of Nine Supremes. The scene startled everyone in the Palace of Nine Supremes. These three bosses have come after our boss with such murderous intent. What do they want? Were they planning to gather the forces of the three heavenly palaces to go against the Palace of Nine Supremes? The Palace of Nine Supremes was developing well and its strength was formidable, but when it came to the three heavenly palaces, they could not even fight one against one, let alone three. Faced with the three bosses' threats, promises, and torture, Yun Yang refused to comply. From the beginning to the end, he did not say a word. The three of them were fuming with rage. "Since you don't want to talk, then don't. We'll stay in the Palace of Nine Supremes for now." The three of them rolled their eyes at the same time. Who were these three men? Their spiritual senses and martial senses were so sharp that they had long noticed that the spiritual chi density in the Palace of Nine Supremes was not only higher than that of the three heavenly palaces, but it was at least 10 times denser. Moreover, the atmosphere here was unusually stable, and it would not diminish just because there were too many people who cultivated tirelessly over and over again. In terms of cultivation environment, cultivating here was much better than cultivating in the heavenly palace. Although the three great dwellings had reached the peak of this world, they still had the desire to improve. Cultivating in such an environment was also a great thing. "You're not leaving?" Yun Yang asked. "There's no hurry. We plan to stay here for 3 to 7 years, maybe even 8 to 10 years. Why don't we make the Palace of Nine Supremes the command headquarters for the war between the two realms? We'll stay here for a long time and oversee the overall situation. It'll save us the trouble of having to meet each other." Yin Yang felt a headache coming on. "Why don't I tell you what's going on? You can leave quickly after that." It was not that Yun Yang wanted to admit defeat, but he had no choice but to lower his head when he was under someone else's roof. If these three men really decided to stay in the Palace of Nine Supremes, all their supplies and expenses would have to be provided according to the best standards, at least Ji Lingxi and Shengguan Lingxiu standards. Although it was not enough to bankrupt the Palace of Nine Supremes, it was still a considerable expense. Furthermore, the total amount of spiritual qi that these three men absorbed every day was also a terrifying number. The three heavenly palaces were not the best paradise in this world, but it was largely due to the three old men's years of swallowing that the spiritual qi was relatively low. If all three of them stayed in the Palace of Nine Supremes, even if the Palace of Nine Supremes' spiritual qi was much better than the three heavenly palaces, there would come a day when the place would be drained. This was a truth that Yun Yang had only discovered after he had ascended to the level of a saint. Therefore, even if he had to compromise and tell the truth, he hoped to send these 3 men away as soon as possible. They were not 3 distinguished guests, but 3 vampires. All right, we won't be leaving after that. Your place is very good, very good. We're very satisfied. The 3 of them were unperturbed. They each went to find a quiet hut, and then they really went to live in it. Yin Yang dared not let these 3 men stay for a long time. After a round of verbal sparring, they finally reached a consensus. We won't be staying for too long. We'll leave when the Supreme Heaven Pavilion selection is over. All of us will leave without delay. You don't have to bother to entertain us either. Just treat us like family. We don't need any food or drink. In spite of this, the Palace of 9 Supremes' eyebrows were still twitching. How dare you say such things? With your cultivation base, you can go without food for tens of thousands of years. Of course, you don't need to provide anything, and we don't even plan to provide anything for you. Don't think that we didn't see your shameless faces. You're just taking advantage of us. What we're really troubled about is the massive consumption of spiritual qi caused by the addition of 3 high-level saints at once. It's bound to be shared with many people. At the very least, cultivating dozens of miles away from these 3 men would not have much effect, if not no effect at all. Dong Qitian was the one who was speechless. These 3 bastards from the 3 residences actually chose the back of the mountain. That's where I live, my territory. I've always been the only one occupying that place. How can I cultivate when the 3 of you come? In terms of spiritual qi absorption, I can't even catch up to the 3 of you. I respected these 3 bosses quite a bit, but now it looks like they're 3 bastards and gangsters. From today onwards, I'll move to the front hall. Dong Qitian told Ping Xiaoyi, find another place and wait until the 3 perverted old men leave. Ping Xiaoyi was dumbfounded. You're picking on the weak, aren't you? Am I the weakest among the entire Palace of 9 Supremes higher-ups? You're calling them perverted old men, but how much better can you be? Ping Xiaoyi left in grief and indignation. F***ck, I'd rather die than be the weakest. I'm going to cultivate with all my might. Grief and indignation notwithstanding, he still had to move. How could he not lower his head when he was under someone else's roof? How could he not compromise when the circumstances were stronger than his? Dong Qitian was the same, and so was Ping Xiaoyi. The rest of you, go out and train quickly. Don't stay at home for now. After Yun Yang gave a few guidance on his disciples' cultivation methods and questions, he immediately ordered them to scram out of the martial world. How's Majordomo Qian? Seeing that Ji Lingxi was not back yet, he knew that Qian Duo was not done yet. The integration of the 4 schools' fixed trade routes has been completed. Appointments and removals have been carried out twice as well. Those who are unqualified and incompetent have all been cleared out. The Palace of 9 Supremes trade routes are now unimpeded. Among the peak masters, Kong Luoyue and Tai Qingsang were currently on duty, so it was Kong Luoyue who had spoken. Is there any movement from the Qian family? Don't they claim to be the leader of the 3 aristocratic families? Why did they admit defeat just like that? Yin Yang was surprised. How can there be no movement? Kong Luoyue rolled his eyes and said, the assassin organizations that the Qian family hired and we've annihilated have exceeded 300 in these few months alone. We've taken advantage of the situation and sent a few peak masters to hunt down the assassin organizations in the world. There are more than 1,200 of them. Until now, there are almost no assassin organizations left in the entire bound of universe. Many of them had already disbanded when we attacked their nests. Assassin, an officially recognized profession in the bound of universe, is rarely done. It's almost extinct. Kong Luoyue coughed and said, now, the loot we've obtained from annihilating the assassin organizations is piling up. Many sects, including the temples and the 3 heavenly palaces, are saying that we've destroyed the continent's employment environment. This can't be allowed to continue. Yun Yang chuckled and asked, what do you mean by that? They say that the martial world has its own rules of survival. It's the martial world where good and bad people mingle. It's the martial world where bloodshed and slaughter exist. We've cleaned up the martial world forcefully and wiped out the assassins. It looks like the world is peaceful, but how can our disciples train when they go out to roam the martial world in the future? It's the martial world where there are people. There will be no fish when the water is too clear, and there will be no martial world when the martial world is too clean. Kong Luoyue chuckled as if he was mocking himself. What they say makes sense. The existence of those organizations is like a link in the martial world's food chain. They're indispensable indeed. Once there's a gap in the food chain, it'll only lead to more collapses and disintegration. If not, the 3 heavenly palaces only need to send a few saint-level experts to wipe them out from all directions and they'll be wiped out long ago. Yunyang rolled his eyes and pursed his lips. That's why I said all of you are honest. Is what they're saying reasonable? It's just twisted logic. How can you believe it? Let's not talk about anything else. Do you really want the few saints to go after these assassin organizations? It'd be a miracle if they could wipe them all out. Even I don't have the confidence to kill all the assassins in the world. The profession of assassins has existed since the beginning of time. How can they be wiped out by mere humans? Besides, do you think we've cleaned up the martial world just because we've moved frequently and gained a lot? Let me tell you, we're still far from it. As long as you think deeper, it's not difficult to figure out that the martial world has no lack of martial artists who take risks. The fastest way to earn money is none other than robbery and murder. How can such a highly rewarding profession be wiped out? Why do you think the Bound of Universe has listed assassins as a legitimate profession? It's because we've witnessed the tenacious vitality of this profession. Even now, it's only because we've killed too many of them that they don't dare to show themselves for the time being. When this wind blows over, they'll still be the same. Besides, there are a few top-notch assassin organizations in the martial world with formidable abilities, especially those assassins who have ascended to legendary status. They might not be weaker than you guys. I'm sure a few of them are even stronger than you guys. They haven't even made a move yet. Any profession has people who can support it. There's a saying that every profession has its own champion. There's another way to explain this saying. The champion, the pinnacle, the top expert, they're all the same. Yin Yang said, we're in the limelight now. There won't be any forces that are willing to fight us to the death. Let's ignore them and do as we should. Boss is right. None of those legendary assassins have made a move. Soul Fall Bell, Longevity Sword, Soul Breaking Spear, Flawless Saber, and the rest are silent. Kong Luoyue said, however, there has been no news of the Qian family's movements in the last 10 days or so. Our men have already eaten away almost a third of their business. The Qian family is slowly showing signs of defeat, but I have a feeling that they won't be so willing to be slaughtered. Yin Yang snorted and said, your concern is right. An established family like the Qian family won't wait for death without a fight. The hired assassins on the surface are just a facade. The final showdown hasn't even begun. The so-called defeat is, of course, an illusion. The more it is so, the more we should strengthen our defenses and be cautious. Ask those outside to go to Qianduodua's side in secret. Watch the situation. The Qian family has tens of thousands of years of history and they're a veteran gold celestial luck banner sect. How can they be easy to deal with? Yes, I understand. The Major Domo has Lingxi personally guarding over there. He can attack openly without fear, but he still has to be wary of sneak attacks. Especially when there's a sneak attack after a period of peace. If there's nothing important in the sect, ask Gu Chaoyang to rush over as well. After arranging these matters, Yun Yang began to look at the disciple roster. The disciple roster was the most troublesome thing in the residence of 9 Supremes. Ever since the rule was made, each peak leader had been tormented by this disciple roster. Even when the authority had been delegated to the senior disciples, they still complained incessantly. The main reason why this name list was so intimidating was because of his son. On this name list, not only did it list the most basic information like the name, age, and gender of the sect's disciples. It also included the last disciple's cultivation level when they submitted the name list, and this time's cultivation level. This could not be falsified. Everyone had to be gathered and verified one by one. However, this was the root of all the trouble. Often, when someone had just been registered, this person would suddenly break through when one was checking on the others. Strictly speaking, such a situation could happen in any sect, but there was no sect that could be like the Palace of Nine Supremes, where dozens or even hundreds of people broke through in a day. Recently, especially, cultivation-based breakthroughs were almost as common as having a meal. The task of reporting and recording had become a huge chore. As a result, this responsibility was rotated among the Palace of Nine Supremes disciples. Whenever someone's name was called, almost all the disciples would look at him sympathetically. This fellow was so pitiful to be dragged into this task again. He was so unlucky. The progress is not bad. Yin Yang flipped through it briefly and put it aside. Ping Zhanyue, who was originally the leader of the Phoenix Cry sect, rolled her eyes. Such progress is only considered not bad? Do you know that if such results were in the original Phoenix Cry sect, even if only one or half of them made such a leap, the entire sect would at least celebrate? Even in their dreams, they would not have dreamed of such a wonderful thing. Low-level disciples definitely won't be able to make it to the war between the two clans this time. Yin Yang told Ping Zhanyue regretfully, there are still benefits to improving slower. Ping Zhanyue was dumbfounded. Then, she choked and coughed violently. Head Venerate, your focus isn't right. This is slow. This is slow. Do you want others to live? Every single one of these low-level disciples you speak of has the ability to become a leader or an elder in other lower-class sects as long as they're released. I don't have anything in common with you. It was only when everyone had left that Yun Yang finally stretched his back. Finally, it's all right. For a moment, he actually felt his whole body relax, and it was a very relaxing feeling. He had been careful and cautious with every step he took. He also had to bear the weight of a large sect at all times. The pressure was immense. Moreover, there was the demon race's seal and the restriction of his powers. Now that the seal was gone and the sect was strengthened, its ability growing by leaps and bounds, reaching the pinnacle of the world. In another half a year, the Palace of Nine Supremes' ability would probably be no weaker than the three heavenly palaces. Thinking of this, Yun Yang stroked his chin and suddenly remembered, now that my ability has reached this level, I'll need to send someone to the Bloody Soul Mountain to guard a foothold. I'll have to discuss with the three Dongfang tribesmen then. It was not a big deal. He could indeed breathe a sigh of relief. Even Shangguan Lingxiu, who was by his side, could clearly feel that Yun Yang had truly breathed a sigh of relief. For a moment, she could not help but exclaim, "You can finally rest." She had watched Yun Yang carry the mountain-like pressure from the Tianxian continent all the way to the bound of universe. Seeing that Yun Yang could finally relax a little today, she could not help reminiscing about the past, feeling an inexplicable ache in her heart. It had not been easy for her man. Yun Yang laughed and said, "I'm suddenly relaxed. Even with my current cultivation base, I still feel like I'm in a trance." "It's strange." Shangguan Lingxiu held his hand tenderly and said softly, "You're just too tired. You've been tensed up all this time. It's not strange that you'll collapse from the sudden relaxation. Rest well and you'll recover naturally." Yin Yang nodded and wrapped his arm around her slender waist gently. Sniffing the fragrance of her hair, he closed his eyes and said, "It's time for a few days of rest." In the following days, Yin Yang did not go out anymore. He did not even cultivate. He could faintly feel that there was an inexplicable force that was searching for him in a very special way. Even when he did not move, even when his body and mind were relaxed and in a state that was barely discernible, the force was still rushing towards the residence of Nine Supremes. It was rushing towards him in a cheerful manner like a reunion between old friends. Yin Yang frowned. Yin Yang knew the source of the force very well, so he immediately released his divine sense to stop it. "Go do what you have to do first. With your current strength, it's not enough to hide from the world yet. Stabilize yourselves first and do what you have to do. I'll go look for you all once I'm done here. Yin Yang had no ill intentions, but he dared not guarantee anything with the three sovereigns here. Therefore, he quickly persuaded them to leave. The strange force disappeared immediately. It was very amenable to persuasion. Although it left rather reluctantly, Feng Lingtian said, from the middle to the later stages of the book, he was unwilling to divide the chapters, it was too troublesome. In the early stages, the plot was clear, with a few chapters for one thing and clear organization. The further into the middle, the more things came. It was fragmented, and the chapter names were difficult to come up with. Everyone had to make do with it. Yes, it's easy to start but difficult to finish. There are millions of readers, and everyone has their own desires and opinions. I'll try my best to write this ending so that no one will have any regrets. Chapter 1441. During this period of leisure, Yin Yang would occasionally oversee the Palace of Nine Supremes. Other than watching his disciples cultivate, his other work was to further improve some of the imperfections in the Palace of Nine Supremes. For example, Yin Yang had changed the original merit redemption standard to a point system. This way, even if he did not have enough points, he could try to accumulate them slowly. It was no longer like before, where he had to have enough points in one go to redeem the target item. Then, of course, he placed a massive amount of resources into the exchange warehouse. There were many mature heaven and earth treasures, mystical metals, spiritual crystals of various colors, mystical weapons, and strange cultivation methods. Even without me, these are enough for this sect to develop for more than 100,000 years. Yin Yang exhaled softly. As for the top-notch items that should not exist in this world, Yin Yang did not put them in. If they were placed inside, they would become a source of trouble. He then placed countless seedlings in the Palace of Nine Supremes herb farm. These were the byproducts of Emmy's transplanting of the spiritual herbs. The Palace of Nine Supremes was rich in spiritual qi, so it was convenient for it to nurture spiritual herbs on its own. After he was done with these, Yin Yang strengthened the foundation formation of the Palace of Nine Supremes by 10 times. This was already beyond the scope of extravagance. When the residence of Nine Supremes was first built, Yin Yang had already used up tens of thousands of ethereal amethysts to set up the foundation formation. This time, with the tenfold reinforcement, Yin Yang had added another 100,000 ethereal amethysts in one go. Unless the 10 saints work together, the mountain guarding formation is indestructible. Yin Yang felt that it was not enough after placing the ethereal amethysts in, so he modified the underground spiritual vein of the Palace of Nine Supremes and set up another formation. The formation was not huge, but the materials used were even more shocking. It included 10 wisps of Qi of Tao, 10 wisps of Qi of Vitality, 10 wisps of Qi of Heaven Tao, and 10 wisps of Qi of the innate soul. With these strange Qi as the foundation, the formation contained an endless supply of nourishing Qi that could sustain the Palace of Nine Supremes for hundreds of thousands of years. To ensure that nothing went wrong, the foundation of Yin Yang's nurturing formation was an innate spirit-gathering seal. It could ensure that the formation would absorb the spiritual Qi of heaven and earth and operate on its own for countless years. Only then could the strange Qi of heaven and earth operate and grow on its own, never changing. It was also from this day onward that the residence of Nine Supremes truly transformed into the best cultivation sanctuary in the entire bound of universe. Even if one was born a wastrel, his aptitude would gradually change and be reborn after spending some time in the Palace of Nine Supremes. From now on, there will be no limits to the cultivation of the martial artists of mysterious universe. Yin Yang looked at everything he had set up in anticipation. This is just a seed, a sliver of opportunity, a bit of karma. In the future, this place will produce countless experts. Yin Yang's longing was not baseless. The so-called extraordinary aptitude and unparalleled talent, the exquisite phoenix physique, the innate Taoist aptitude and whatnot, would no longer be the limit. It would only be a slightly higher starting point. This was because children with such a physique would also slowly evolve their physiques. As for how far it could evolve, no one could say for sure. However, it was certain that these aptitudes would no longer be the ceiling of one's cultivation talent. Yin Yang had a premonition that he might not stay in this world for too long, so he had made arrangements in advance to prepare for a rainy day. For 3 whole months, Yin Yang really did not step out of the Palace of 9 Supremes. Although he had relaxed and even temporarily put aside his cultivation, the progress of his cultivation did not stop. The main reason was probably the endless divine art. The cultivation of the endless divine art required the chi of karma, and the chi of karma produced by the demon race's civil war and massacre was being transmitted here intermittently. Although Yin Yang's cultivation base was no longer advancing by leaps and bounds, there was still improvement every day. Therefore, the only one who was not satisfied during this period of time was Shangguan Lingxiu. Yin Yang had not been able to break through her insistence, and there were a few times when the same thing happened again. Then, one day, Shangguan Lingxiu suddenly ran away. "How long are you all going to keep me in? Can there be an end to these days? There's some hope." Yin Yang roared in grief and indignation. "I have 2 wives. But I'm still a virgin when I reach the cultivation base of a saint. How tragic. Is there even a way to write this book?" Dongfang Haoran and the other 2 did not move in the residence of 9 Supremes for 3 months. In the beginning, they only felt that their cultivation base was growing rapidly, but after some time, they unexpectedly realized that their realizations had increased. The 3 of them had been here for 3 months. When they felt something and opened their eyes again, they were shocked to find that their cultivation base that had stagnated for a long time had advanced by a small level. The 3 of them were inexplicably shocked by the result. When one's cultivation base had reached such a level, it was no longer as difficult as ascending to heaven to describe it. It was almost impossible. Forget 3 months, even if it was 3,000 years, they might not even be able to move a little. It was all due to the painstaking effort of the years, little by little progress. Now, however, there was a change after 3 months in the residence of 9 Supremes. This was clearly a miracle. Once the 3 of them came out of seclusion and stood at the highest point of the Palace of 9 Supremes, their hearts were filled with emotion. When they looked at Yin Yang again, there was even a tinge of jealousy. "This fellow is here every day. Humph. We should go to the Supreme Heaven Pavilion. It's almost time." The Supreme Heaven Pavilion has revealed itself much earlier than expected since it glowed. It's better to do this as soon as possible. The 3 rulers felt that it was strange that the selection of Supreme Heaven Pavilion had been brought forward, so they suggested that it should be carried out earlier. "All right." Yin Yang nodded in agreement. However, the 4 of them did not depart immediately. The 3 rulers had extorted a considerable amount of chi of vitality from Yin Yang before they left the Palace of 9 Supremes with Yin Yang in satisfaction. "Don't come again in the future." Yin Yang's face was as black as charcoal. "I've always been the one robbing others. When have I ever been robbed? I, the raiders of Black and White ruthless duo, have never been so humiliated. I've had my feathers plucked, and it's not enough to be plucked once, I have to be plucked again. Every time I come, I have to be robbed. How can there be such a logic in this world? Why do I feel that the sudden advance of Supreme Heaven Pavilion selection this time has something to do with Yin Yang?" Shiman Fafu mumbled as they flew. Dongfang Haoran nodded in agreement. "Isn't it a coincidence? I feel the same way too." Beigong Lioli said angrily, "You 2 old fools can't just link everything together. What if you wrongly accuse a good person? So what if Supreme Heaven Pavilion selection has been brought forward? Can all the accidents in this world have anything to do with Yin Yang? You're being unreasonable and making things up." Shiman Fafu said, "Then what's the reason? Looking at how confident you are, you must have a better idea. Would you please enlighten me?" Beigong Lioli stroked her chin and said, "I dare not enlighten you. I've suspected Yin Yang in the beginning. After all, he has too many similar records. It's not an exaggeration to add one more. However, even if it's because of him, it's definitely not his intention. After all, he's a good person who gave me dozens of children. This is reasonable enough, Dongfang Howren and Shiman Fafu flew forward without a word, pursing their lips. Alright, you have a lot of wives, you're awesome. You have a lot of face now, you call the shots, alright? F***ck, this is too much of a blow. Beigong Lioli was still nagging from behind, you haven't said how many children do you two have now? I almost didn't react just now. You're changing the topic, aren't you? Why don't you talk about something serious? Creation of life, it's a big deal. Dongfang Howren and Shiman Fafu remained silent, bursting with their top speed and dashing to the front. Look, these two are even dominators. What kind of bearing is this? Beigong Lioli grinned at Yunyang and said, I'm just asking a question. Look at your dark face, even I can't stand it. Yunyang responded with a chuckle and rolled his eyes, flashing him a middle finger. F***ck, your father gave you the chi of vitality and you still want to make things up for your father? Is there any place for reasoning in this world? He's a good person who gave me dozens of children. Do you F***king know that there's another way to interpret this? If your father is really an adult, then so be it. But your father is still a virgin, do you know that? Your father won't take the blame for this, I can't. Since they still had time to spare, these people did not travel by tearing the space apart. After all, it was an extravagant method that consumed a lot of cultivation base. However, Dongfang Howren, Shiman Fafu, and Yunyang had long regretted it. Neither of them had expected Beigong Lioli, who had always looked like a brute, to be so detestable. On the other side, Ji Lingxi was glowing red from head to toe. It was Yunyang's nemesis, the red protective glow reappearing in maroon. In front of Ji Lingxi, a black-robed elder was wailing as he was flung away. As he flew, his body disintegrated. As his flesh and blood splattered, even his bones were shattered. His divine sense was like a fire in the wind, flickering and disappearing bit by bit. You, who are you? The black-robed elder howled in agony as he struggled to ask. It doesn't matter who I am. I'm just waiting for you here. Ji Lingxi said coldly, quietly waiting for your attack. The black-robed elder uttered his last hateful words, the Qian family is wrong. Before his words echoed in the air, his body dissipated completely, his divine sense vanishing along with it. He's the Qian family's old forefather, Qian Shangyue. Qian Duoduo's gaze was filled with a complicated emotion. He's also the Qian family's top expert, a pinnacle expert of this world, a half-saint. Ji Lingxi said faintly, we were waiting for the Qian family's extreme counterattack, for this half-saint. If we really went over to question them about the previous assassination, the Qian family would only say that it was done by one of the family's disciples and used him as a scapegoat. With the Qian family's gold celestial luck banner background, we couldn't use that as an excuse to go to the extreme. Now that the Qian family's old forefather has come personally, this matter can be settled. There's no room for negotiation. Ji Lingxi said faintly, keep the Qian family's old forefather's remains and order the Palace of 9 Supremes to gather here. Let's discuss, what should we do with the things here? Ahem, Brother Wang, you are the oldest. Why don't all the benefits here belong to you? F***ck. I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want it either. I don't want it either. How can it be in my eyes? Hu Xiaofan is too wicked. It's fine if he snatched it on the spot. That's because he is so strong that we can't match him. Survival of the fittest is the law of nature. But if I work hard to snatch it, but still have to send him many benefits from tens of thousands of miles away. I can't swallow this. I'd rather not have the benefits here. Who said it wasn't? In the end, the crowd finally came to a decision. Brother Zhang, you are the youngest, have the least cultivation resources, and have the weakest cultivation. Let's just give all the things here to you. That younger brother Zhang, he never thought that he would have such a big pie falling on his head when he just came in to gain some experience. Ahem. You're still young, and you don't care about your reputation. We'll help you sort it out, and then give it to you. You're a great man. Give 90% to that Hu Xiaofan. Ahem, hero Hu. Ahem, hero Hu, yes. Ahem, ahem, ahem. A series of coughs sounded. F***ck. Such a thing still wants others to call him hero? He's not happy to not call him that. Which part of him looks like a hero? Hu Xiaofan's shout was, hero who is eager for justice. The so-called shout was a name that was widely known only when one called it by oneself. It was completely different from a nickname given by others. All the people in the pugilistic world who knew him would twitch all over when they heard this shout. He had never seen such a hero before. Sneak attacks, fabricate rumors, blackmail, coerce, be greedy for money, and be selfish. He would eat everything he had and then take it away, refusing to give it to others. How could such a person have the cheek to call himself hero who was eager for justice? It's natural for you to help him, but if he helps you, you will go bankrupt, and your children and grandchildren won't be able to repay this favor. How could you call him hero who is eager for justice? Hu Xiaofan's eagerness for justice was indeed true. No matter who was in trouble, he would enthusiastically come to help. But after helping, he asked for remuneration, and even demanded an exorbitant price, making people feel as if the sky was falling down. What kind of explanation was this? There was once a friend in the pugilistic world who quarreled with his friend. The cause was just a moment of anger after getting drunk. The two of them sparred on the spot, and one of them lost. In fact, it was just a fall. Then, Hu Xiaofan, who claimed to be his friend, insisted on standing up for his friend. Yes, it was to help. In the end, the two of them went bankrupt and gave it to Hu Xiaofan alone. Not only that, they even wrote an IOU of 100,000 pieces of low-grade spiritual jade. There were so many examples like this that Hu Xiaofan was now notorious in the pugilistic world. It was to the point that even mystical beasts would turn their heads and run away when they heard these three words. Just because a mystical beast injured its leg, Hu Xiaofan helped it, and then this mystical beast clan sold hundreds of its mystical beasts to become Hu Xiaofan's slaves. Moreover, they signed a contract for 30 generations of their descendants in one go. Tell me, who would dare to ask for his help? Now, if the pugilistic world heard a voice coming from the side, do you need help? Most of the people on both sides would instantly scatter like birds and beasts. They wouldn't even bother to find out who was asking for help. In any case, they wouldn't fight anymore, okay? Hu Xiaofan once created a record. There were two people who had been enemies for generations, and they couldn't live under the same sky. One killed the other's brother, and the other killed the other's sister. Whenever the two of them met, they would fight to the death. However, the cultivation of these two people happened to be on par, and they were evenly matched. There was no clear winner or loser in the end. One day, the two of them made an appointment to fight to the death. In the end, when it was about to happen, Hu Xiaofan rushed over excitedly and asked as usual, "Do you need help?" In the end, the two of them immediately threw down their weapons and hugged each other affectionately. They patted each other's shoulders and called each other brothers with tears in their eyes. "Brother, I misunderstood you. Brother, it's all my fault." No, it's my fault, no." Little brother's heart was clouded by lard. "Don't say anything, let's go have a drink." From then on, the two of them turned hostility into friendship, and were betrothed to each other before they were even born. What happened next was a story for another time, but it could still prove how powerful and terrifying Hu Xiaofan's words of help were. On the other side, Yu Qingheng, who was drinking, stood up abruptly and apologized to the people around him. Without another word, he soared into the sky and left quickly. Somewhere, Bai Yexing soared into the sky without warning and sped away like a shooting star. All the disciples of the Palace of Nine Supremes were heading in the same direction, like moths darting into a flame, one after another. The battle between the Palace of Nine Supremes and the Qian family had affected most of the bound of universe. The Qian family's foundation was undoubtedly profound. It was no longer the top aristocratic family in the bound of universe, but it was still incomparable to the current Palace of Nine Supremes. For this battle, the Palace of Nine Supremes had dispatched 20 Saint Emperors at once, and most of these Saint Emperors were at the pinnacle of third-class and fourth-class Saint Emperors. Other than the top-notch Saint Lords, there were also hundreds of Saint Lords and 5,000 Saint Emperor cultivators. They came with the force of a mountain, and the one who attracted the most attention and led this battle was the wife of the sect leader of the Nine Supremes. I don't know what this madam's cultivation is, but a half-saint expert launched a sneak attack, and it seems that this madam didn't even have the chance to defend herself. She took the full brunt of the attack, but the result was that the half-saint was killed by the backlash. It was an extreme way of dying, with his body crushed and his soul destroyed. What level of cultivation base was required to achieve this? When the news of the Qian family's patriarch's death spread, everyone in the Qian family was dumbfounded. That was a half-saint. He had gone all out and struck the target with all his might, but the target was unharmed while he himself was the one who had died from the recoil. It was a myth no matter how one looked at it. In the face of the Palace of Nine Supremes' all-encompassing attack, the Qian family could only put up a last-ditch struggle for a while. In just a few days, dozens of Qian family's supreme venerables were killed, and 3 Saint Emperors were crippled. 3,000 of their core forces, including Saint Kings and Saint Emperors, were all dead in the wilderness. The Qian family had asked for help everywhere, sacrificing their capital and making countless promises, but no one had responded. The Sacred Heart Palace and the Sacred Soul Palace pretended to be deaf and mute, while the other 2 families were afraid that the Palace of Nine Supremes would seize the opportunity to attack. They were desperately trying to please the Qian family. "You're at death's door, and you still want to drag us down with you?" 7 days later, the Qian family's forces were completely routed. Wherever the Palace of Nine Supremes passed, all the Qian family's shops were sealed, their men were all driven out, and those who resisted were killed without mercy. On the 10th day, the Qian family announced their full surrender. However, the Palace of Nine Supremes made it clear that they would not accept a simple surrender, throwing out a dozen harsh conditions. If the Qian family accepted all of these conditions, the Qian family would be completely gone. The Qian family said that they needed to consider it and asked for 3 days. The Palace of Nine Supremes agreed, but in these 3 days, they had taken all the Qian family's assets and properties as their own. When the Qian family said that they wanted to talk again 3 days later, they were shocked to find that there were a few more conditions. The Qian family had no choice but to accept all of the Palace of Nine Supremes' conditions. The Qian family members who had harmed Qian Duo and his family were all expelled from the family, and the cultivation base of the experts were all destroyed, leaving them to fend for themselves. The once flourishing family of the world's #1 financial magnate was finally removed from the bound of universe after 7 months of fighting with the residents of Nine Supremes. The Qian family's celestial luck banner was destroyed, no longer existing in the world. The entire bound of universe was shaken when this shocking news spread. If it had been in the past, there would have been experts from the 3 heavenly palaces who would have come to mediate and protect the family. At the very least, they would have tried to protect this celestial luck banner that had a considerable connection to the bound of universe's providence. Now, however, after Yun Yang's massacre, no one from the 3 heavenly palaces came forward. They had been pretending to be deaf and mute from the beginning. No one was stupid. It was a small matter to come forward and mediate, but to offend the bound of universe's supreme cloud because of this, they might also offend their own palace masters at the same time, and they might even offend the 4 great rulers. It was clear which was more important. I'd better watch the show. It's too dangerous. Chapter 1442. It had to be said that Ji Lingxi's question was unnecessary. The Qian family was in ruins now. Even if all the members of the Qian family knelt before little Fatty and asked him to be their ancestor, he would not be interested, let alone be the head of the family. Moreover, little Fatty really had no longing for the Qian family. Little Fatty Qian Duo was one of the founders of the Palace of Nine Supremes, the majordomo who was second only to the emperor. After experiencing the process of building the Palace of Nine Supremes from scratch, his yearning for the Palace of Nine Supremes was enough to override everything else. the Palace of Nine Supremes was his home. Even if little Fatty was foolish and blinded by greed, he would not want to leave home. Moreover, Qian Duo was the one who understood the Palace of Nine Supremes the most, the one who could see the potential of the Palace of Nine Supremes. Little Fatty shook his head like a rattle drum. Gu Chaoyang sighed in disappointment. What Ji Lingxi had asked earlier was actually the result of Gu Chaoyang's prolonged pleading. It was not Yun Yang's intention at all. Gu Chaoyang had set his eyes on the position of the Palace of Nine Supremes majordomo since the beginning of the merger. It could even be said that Gu Chaoyang had set his eyes on the position since the merger. He felt that no one would be more suitable than he was. Gu Chaoyang thought that his cultivation base and aptitude were probably at this level so far. Perhaps, he could still become a saint after years of hard work. However, it was impossible for him to advance further. If there was no hope of advancing further, he would need something to hold the Palace of Nine Supremes. What could he do? Was he going to be a charlatan forever? The position of majordomo was a job tailor-made for him. However, there was someone else in the position now, and it was someone he could never touch under normal circumstances. If Qian Duo did not resign, he would have no hope of ascending the position. It was also because of this reason that Gu Chaoyang had forcefully predicted God's will, hoping for a turning point. Using the Qian family's legend as a foundation, he had asked Ji Lingxi for Qian Duo's help and asked for Qian Duo's thoughts. If Qian Duo really returned to the Qian family and took charge of the family, Gu Chaoyang would naturally ascend the position. This would be a turning point for Gu Chaoyang, a 1 in a million chance. Since Ji Lingxi came to the bound of universe, Gu Chaoyang had helped her a great deal. It was out of courtesy that he had come forward to ask, but little Fatty had not thought of it at all. In fact, from the moment Ji Lingxi asked the question, little Fatty had lowered his head in contemplation. It looked like he was pondering Ji Lingxi's question, but he was actually sending a message to Yun Yang. Yun Yang replied through the Nine Supremes token, "I didn't say that, damn, I've been exposed." With Yun Yang's detailed reply, how could the fatty not understand the situation before him? His gaze towards Gu Chaoyang was tinged with murderous intent. This old bastard, how dare he trick me? You want to gain power. Daring to target Lord Fatty's position. You don't want to think about it? Your father will make life difficult for you in the future. Ji Lingxi was also discussing with Gu Chaoyang, "I've asked for you. Majordomo Qian has no intention of stepping down. Don't say this again in the future. Actually, I think it's good that you're a deputy majordomo. Qian Duo is in charge of the residents of Nine Supremes' external business. After this battle against the Qian family, he'll probably spend more time traveling the trade routes outside. The family will definitely need another internal majordomo. Such a large family business can't be managed by him alone. Qian Duo is the Palace of Nine Supremes' founding elder after all. It's already too much for me to help you this time. In the future, it's more important to build a good relationship." Gu Chaoyang thought about it and agreed that it was reasonable. In addition, he had only managed to find a turning point when Ji Lingxi's question was fruitless. The general trend was on Qian Duo's side. He would only be finding trouble for himself if he continued to oppose him. Gu Chaoyang had always been a man who obeyed fate. After the fruitless attempt this time, his resentment faded away and he took the initiative to look for Qian Duo. "Brother Qian, regarding the Qian family, you're from the Qian family after all and you're the victim. Do you have any additional conditions? Just say it, we'll give you some advice. No matter what, I'll make sure this matter is done beautifully for you." Gu Chaoyang spoke in a tone of complete sincerity. Since they were going to work together in the future, of course, Gu Chaoyang had to build a relationship first. In spite of this, Qian Duo looked at this fellow who was about to kick him out of his position warily. "Brother Gu, you have something to say." "Ha ha ha. Brother Gu, your name reminds me of hiring an assassin." Gu Chaoyang's face twitched. "Brother Qian, Brother Gu, you're not really planning to hire an assassin, are you?" Little Fatty chuckled as he looked at Gu Chaoyang. Gu Chaoyang felt like his stomach was about to explode. Is there something wrong with this little fatty? I'm here to express my goodwill and discuss a problem with you. What are you talking about? You must be joking, Brother Qian. Gu Chaoyang's usual arrogance came online at once as he said with a fake smile, Brother Qian, I have to say that you, Brother Qian, remind me of a young lady's bosom. Qian Duo put on a fake smile and said, Brother Gu, you're wrong. Can't a man have a bosom? You're being far-fetched. It doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. Ha ha ha. Brother Qian's mind is bright. I'm impressed. Ha ha ha. Brother Gu's foresight is flawless. I'm impressed, haha. Brother Qian. Ha. Brother Gu. Brother Qian, you still have to work hard. Brother Gu, a man's reputation has to be won on the battlefield. How can a crooked path last? I heard that Brother Gu has always followed heaven's will and accepted your fate. I hope that you won't change your original intention. Don't forget your original intention and follow through. Gu Chaoyang felt like his lungs were about to explode. Why is this fatty so annoying? It's your fortune that your father is willing to support you. Do you know how many people your father has actively supported in this lifetime? How dare you act so pretentiously? Gu Chaoyang had always thought highly of himself and looked askance at everyone in the world. It was so in Tianxian continent, and it was still the same when he came to the bound of universe. Back when he was facing Mr. Nian, he was still arrogant despite being imprisoned for a long time. He had schemed against Qian Duo, but now that he had taken the initiative to be friendly, he was ridiculed instead. It was only natural that he found it hard to accept. At this point it was hard to continue, and the two parted on bad terms. On the other side, Ji Lingxi sent a message to Yun Yang, the Palace of Nine Supremes is too vast. It's inevitable that it'll be overstretched if there's only one majordomo. Is it possible to add Gu Chaoyang as one of the majordomo of the Palace of Nine Supremes? Qian Duo started the family as an elder. It's not appropriate for someone to be on equal footing with him all of a sudden, Yun Yang replied. Gu Chaoyang has to convince Qian Duo himself, only then can both of them work together. Before Qian Duo is convinced, he can only be given part of the majordomo's authority without an actual title. Ji Lingxi thought about it carefully and realized that what Yun Yang said made sense. Although Gu Chaoyang and Yun Yang were old acquaintances and had unfathomable means, most people did not know that she and Yun Yang were aware of this. If he were to appoint Gu Chaoyang directly, it would not only give off a feeling of nepotism, but it would also chill the hearts of the residents of Nine Supremes elders. Ji Lingxi called Gu Chaoyang over discreetly and said, we can only fulfill the majordomo's duty first. We still have to consider the title. If we want to set the title early, the first thing we have to do is to convince Qian Duo. It'll be even better if more people, including Qian Duo, recommend him. With Elder Gu's almighty ability, you can even predict God's will. What's a trifling matter? What's a trifling matter? Gu Chaoyang was filled with bitterness now. Heaven's will was not to be deceived indeed. Gu Chaoyang was not courteous at all. He had schemed and planned to ascend early, but now he had to swallow his words. If he had known this would happen, why would he have played those petty tricks? Now that little fatty is like a snake when he sees me, avoiding me like the plague. I don't even have a target to aim for, how am I going to convince him? With little fatty standing in front of me, how can anyone recommend me? Speaking of friendship, they're old acquaintances. Due to this incident, he had almost become enemies with little fatty, and little fatty had become someone he couldn't get around. At least for now, little fatty was his immediate superior. He had actually fallen into a position where he could only work without a title. What the F***ck? F***ck, I've been calculating a few days ago and there's a turning point, but there's a sudden change. Turns out that the turning point should be here. I've really shot myself in the foot. I've committed suicide. Gu Chaoyang was dispirited. Still, it's not impossible to handle this kid. With his personality that brightens up with a little bit of sunshine, I don't believe I can't coax him as long as I'm careful in my training. King Hell, your father is old, but I actually have to be subservient and coax a kid carefully. Gu Chaoyang heaved a heavy sigh. How Gu Chaoyang would train Qian Duo had nothing to do with the grand scheme of things. The current focus was the Palace of Nine Supremes' trade routes. They had basically unified the martial world without any rivals. This also meant that there was a lot of work to be done. Almost everyone was so busy that their feet did not even touch the ground. Qian Duo often felt overwhelmed and powerless. It was actually a good thing to have a helper like Gu Chaoyang, especially now that he only had authority and a nameless identity. He also had to be careful of Qian Duo. To Qian Duo, it was a joy. He would call Gu Chaoyang over every day to vent his frustrations when he had nothing better to do. As the war against the Qian family came to an end, the entire Palace of Nine Supremes plunged into another unprecedented bustle. In terms of combat strength, apart from some necessary security personnel, most of the other forces had withdrawn from the battlefield. The Palace of Nine Supremes' move allowed the other two noble families in the martial world to heave a sigh of relief. The Qian family was an established aristocratic family with a strong foundation. The market they had left behind was enough for the Palace of Nine Supremes to digest for a few years. These few years of buffer time was a rare breathing space for the two families. They still had to discuss their next step and confirm their strategy. The world of Jianghu became calm, and there were no waves. The training of the Palace of Nine Supremes' disciples was fully unleashed. Yin Yang, Dongfang Haoran, and the others had long arrived outside the legendary Supreme Heaven Pavilion. It was Yin Yang's first time here. Questions arose wherever he looked because all he could see was desolation. However, when he focused his gaze, it was a blur in front of him. Yin Yang's thoughts raced and he instantly deduced that there was a special barrier in front of him. A layer of translucent membrane separated the two sides. Suddenly, the weather changed. A bone-chilling wind howled. On the other side of the blurred field of vision, countless rays of golden light could be vaguely seen, spinning slowly. It was a spectacular sight. The place that's emitting the golden light is the Supreme Heaven Pavilion. Dongfang Haoran pointed with his finger. Is it possible to remove this layer that blurs one's vision? Yin Yang asked curiously. It can't. Shiman Fanfu's gaze was solemn as he said, as long as the Supreme Heaven Pavilion doesn't move itself, even a Saint Pinnacle expert can't take a step into the blurry barrier. Yin Yang thought about it and said, oh, he had long predicted that the blurry barrier would be difficult to penetrate. Compared to the blurry barrier, he was more concerned about the spinning golden light on the other side. The golden light seemed to be filled with an indescribable aura. This is the ancient land of desolation. The weather here is different from other places. Beigong Lioli said, the five winds change in a day here. They can scrape one's soul, flesh, bones, blood, and deific consciousness. Even cultivators like us who have reached the level of saint dare not take it lightly. You've just arrived, don't treat it as an ordinary wind and be careless. Yin Yang nodded in acknowledgement. Yin Yang was most proficient in the art of wind and cloud manifestation. Once he arrived, he realized that the wind was different. When the three lights shine together at night, it's when the Supreme Heaven Pavilion opens. These three lights refer to moonlight, starlight, and death glow. They're not the usual three lights of the sun, moon, and star. Dongfang Haoran said, moonlight and starlight are no different from what we see normally. Only the death glow has the effect of sinking one's soul. Although the strength of our souls has reached the pinnacle of this world and can't be shaken by ordinary forces, if we sink into it, our deific consciousness will waver and it will hinder the saint path. Yin Yang nodded in acknowledgement. How much longer do we need to wait? Yin Yang asked in a low voice. When it's about time, the Supreme Heaven Pavilion will release the welcoming light. The number of lights released means how many people can enter this time. It's clear at a glance. The main reason why each palace trains more than one son of saint is because the number of welcoming lights in each round of the Supreme Heaven Pavilion is different. I see. Yin Yang asked, have the sons of saints from your families arrived? Of course they've arrived a long time ago. Shiman Fanfu smiled faintly. Now, they're just waiting for our welcoming light to appear. Why don't I see them? I can't smell any life force at all. They're already hiding in the saint's barrier. It's only natural that we can't sense any life force. We're already at the level of saints, so of course we're not afraid of the light, but they can't. They'll only wait when the welcoming light appears. They'll step onto the welcoming light at once and enter it. Only then will they not be harmed and successfully pass the selection test. So we can only wait now? Yes, we can only wait. Dongfang Haoran said, from the moment the Supreme Heaven Pavilion appears, there will be a swirling golden light. The welcoming light may appear at any time within a month's time. As for the light of guidance, it would only last for an hour. This is something we can't do anything about. We can only wait for it to appear passively. There's no way to predict it and there's no shortcut. Maybe the welcoming light will appear the day after the golden light appears. No one can say for sure. The three hegemons all had helpless looks on their faces as they spoke of this matter. The four of them walked quickly to the back of a barren hill. Going around the hill, Yin Yang realized that there were already 4 tents set up here. Outside each tent, there was a faint white glow. That was the saint's light that Dongfang Haoran and the others had imbued. Only a saint-level power like this could resist the dangerous weather for a long time. Inside the tent were, of course, Lai Kuangfeng, Feng Patian, Huan Wenyuan, and Lanting. Huan Wenyuan and Lanting were in the same tent, and in the last tent was Tian Fa's mystical beast, the Eagle King. Seeing Yun Yang's arrival, the Eagle King danced in joy and was extremely cordial. Lord Supreme Cloud, are you here to go in as well? Yin Yang was at a loss for words, not knowing how to answer. Looking at Feng Patian, then at Lai Kuangfeng, then at the Orchid Pavilion's illusory Wenyuan. Yin Yang suddenly felt embarrassed. Why don't I not go in? Yin Yang said with a bitter face. It felt like he was snatching something from a child. Dongfang Haoran and the other two laughed. It might be difficult to have a chance to make fun of a saint-level expert in the future. If they did not laugh now, when would they? No way. Why not? I have the Palace of 9 Supremes, and my development prospects are better than the 3 heavenly palaces combined. I can definitely go further than all of you. Yin Yang's face was flushed. With my current cultivation base, I can't even get past myself if I go in and fight with them for the legacy. I'm just thick-skinned, not shameless. Being thick-skinned or not doesn't apply to the current situation. It's fine if others don't go in, it's just a personal choice, but you have to go in. Dongfang Haoran said seriously, if there's only one ray of welcoming light this time, it'll be you going in. If there's one more ray of welcoming light, it's none of your business who goes in and who doesn't. You have to go anyway. Why is that? Yin Yang really could not figure it out. I don't belong to the 3 heavenly palaces. Besides, the residence of 9 Supremes has its own legacy, so why would we need the Supreme Heaven Pavilion's welcoming? The reason is very simple. Up until now, in every Supreme Heavenly Pavilion selection, we have only received the inheritance of this heavenly palace. There should be a higher level inheritance above this, a higher level inheritance that we have yet to obtain. Dongfang Haoran said seriously, we sincerely hope that you can get it, and only you have a chance of getting it. Throughout the history of Supreme Heaven Pavilion selections, the highest they can go is only the 3rd level. However, Supreme Heaven Pavilion has a total of 7 levels, and the difference is obvious. Going up to the 3rd level is already the limit of our 3 heavenly palaces. As long as we get the document of inheritance, we can inherit the 3 heavenly palaces. Dongfang Haoran's face was slightly twisted. Back then, I used all my strength and tried to step into the 4th level, but I only got to the 8th step out of the 9 steps of the 4th level before I was kicked down. Kicked down? Yin Yang was stunned. There's actually someone in Supreme Heaven Pavilion? It's the transformation of spiritual energy into martial arts. Shiman Fan sighed. I didn't expect you to be one level higher than me. Humph, I'm also at the 8th level. Beigong Lioli was smug. Shiman Fan was helpless. Beigong, we've known each other for tens of thousands of years, but I never thought that you'd be so despicable. The first level can give you the benefit of strengthening your cultivation base, increasing your ability by 10%. The second level can strengthen your deific consciousness, increasing your cultivation base by another 20%. The third level can strengthen your soul, doubling your ability again. Dongfang Haoran said slowly, so, whether you can break our record or not, whether you can get the legacy or not, the benefits you can get from entering are already great benefits. The candidates of the 3 heavenly palaces can only enter once in their lives. Yin Yang's curiosity was piqued. Chapter 1443. Even so, I still feel embarrassed. This is like a middle-aged man and a child going to a private school together. Although they both benefit and the adults benefit more, it still feels like an adult bullying a child. Yin Yang sighed in self-deprecation. The 3 rulers guffawed. Just like what Shiman Huanyu had said earlier, the opportunity to make fun of a ruler was too rare. It had to be grasped as it would not come again. Of course, it was also because Yin Yang's improvement was too fast. Whether or not there would be a chance to make fun of him in the future was another matter altogether. Whether or not he dared to do so was the key. No matter what kind of joke a ruler made, how many people dared to make fun of it? It was not because they could not, but because they did not dare to. On the other side, Feng Patian, Huan Wenyuan, Lanting, Lai Kuangfeng, and the others were also feeling complicated and indescribable. At the same time, they deeply felt that the other sons of God had really died too unjustly. Yin Yang did not care about the position of the masters of the 3 heavenly palaces at all. It was the 3 rulers who fought for it, almost forcing it on him while crying and screaming. What was there to fight for? It was such a figure who wanted to make Yin Yang an imaginary enemy, but in the end, they died in his hands one after another. Going against such a powerhouse, if you don't die, who will? Now, it seemed that they were wronged but not wronged at all. Yin Yang had now ascended to the same level as the 3 rulers. Even if he was still not there, his realm was already synchronized. How could such a character be interested in the position of palace master of the 3 heavenly palaces? Moreover, the palace of 9 supremes now possessed a foundation and influence that surpassed that of the 3 heavenly palaces. Perhaps his overall ability was still inferior, but his potential had to be calculated the other way around. The former was like the rising sun, gradually flourishing, while the latter was like the sun that had passed the middle of the sky and would eventually set. It was only a matter of time before he truly surpassed them. Why would such a person come to fight for the position of palace lord with them? They were no longer on the same level. He even thought it was embarrassing to do the same thing as them and disdained to do it. If he had known that this would happen, why did so many people die? In the end, wasn't it because he didn't have enough confidence in himself? Huan Wenyuan, on the other hand, had another thought. When he first saw Yin Yang, he thought that he was just an amateur who had popped out of nowhere. Although he had some luck, it was only a bit of luck. Now, it seemed that he could only look up to him. How could the word luck describe even 1,000th of it? If such a person was born in the 3 great heavenly palaces, would he be able to grow to such a level? Would he perish early in the battle for power? Yin Yang was already a saint now. Although he and the others had broken through to the Saint Lord level thousands of years ago, it was difficult for them to progress further. All of them had stopped at the first level of the Saint Lord level. The gap between them was too great. No, come to think of it, how old was Yin Yang? How long had he been cultivating? They looked about the same age as Yin Yang, but that was only in appearance. In terms of actual age, how much older were they compared to Yin Yang? Thinking of this, he could not help but sigh, and his morale became even lower. Should I fight with Lanting for the position of Palace Lord? Or, go out to roam Jianghu? Or to kill demons? As time passed, the flowing golden light within the barrier grew brighter while the blurry feeling that the barrier gave off became fainter. Suddenly, amidst the howling wind, several beams of golden light shot out without warning. Dongfang Haoran hollered, "The light of induction is here. Everyone, after entering, go and find your own opportunities. Don't fight each other and waste your energy." Shiman Fafu roared as well, "Yun Yang, they are all juniors. Don't lose your dignity." Yin Yang's nose twisted in anger. "What do you mean by that? Are you worried that I'll harm your disciples inside? Am I that kind of person?" Unbeknownst to him, the three rulers were not worried that Yun Yang would harm them. Instead, they were worried that their juniors would do something inappropriate and offend Yun Yang. After all, there was a grudge between them. The death of the three rulers' children was not far away, proving that Yun Yang was not a magnanimous person. Once he struck, he would not show mercy. The golden light grew brighter and brighter. Almost in the blink of an eye, the golden light expanded abruptly and turned into golden bridges, solidifying before their eyes. The group confirmed the number again and again and fell into a state of shock. What was going on? Yun Yang, the Eagle King, and the 4 from the 3 celestial palaces were a total of 6 people who planned to enter the Supreme Heaven Pavilion, but 7 beams of golden light had appeared. Who would the remaining one be given to? It was impossible for Dongfang Haoran and the other 2. However, other than the 3 of them, there were no other living people here. Right at this moment, a gray shadow suddenly flew over. This person was completely shrouded in a chilling wind, and when he stood still, he was already bathed in golden light. What he saw was a guest wearing a crown and a yellow robe. This was a king. Everyone looked again, only to see that the yin qi surrounding the person was very strange, as if they could see the appearance of the person clearly, but to say that they could not really see it clearly, it made them click their tongues in wonder. The newcomer chuckled and said, "The concourse of the underworld is here to join in as well. Lord Supreme Cloud, it's been a long time." Yin Yang's voice came from the golden light with a warm smile. "Are you Lord Yama?" The gray shadow laughed. "Lord Supreme Cloud, you have a good memory. I am indeed Yama." Yin Yang's faint chuckle came again. "I've been wondering when the concourse of the underworld would appear in this realm, whether it was necessary for you to come to the Supreme Heaven Pavilion selection this time. I didn't expect you all to come anyway." King Yama's voice was heard again. "Honestly, we didn't want to come. Perhaps the next Supreme Heaven Pavilion selection would be a better time for us to enter the realm, but we really need a base here in the bound of universe. The underworld is newly established and everything has to start from scratch. We really have nothing, we desperately need to be acknowledged by this heaven and earth. We're not like the Celestial Court. The Celestial Court has existed for a long time. Even when it was destroyed and rebuilt, its foundation still exists. We, on the other hand, have no foundation at all, so we could only resort to this trick." Yin Yang said, "I see. But why are you here this time?" King Yama wore a reluctant expression and said bitterly, "I didn't come willingly. No one was willing to come either. I lost the finger-guessing game, so I had to come." Everyone who heard King Yama's last sentence instinctively rolled their eyes. This was a good thing that others could not even dream of, yet none of them were willing to come. The one who came in the end actually came because he lost the finger-guessing game. This was even more arrogant than Yun Yang, who did not want adults to bully children. Dongfang Haoran, Shiman Fafu, and the others frowned deeply, their suspicions clouding their minds. Who was this person? What King Yama? What organization did this person belong to? Why did such an organization pop up out of nowhere? Their tone was so arrogant, and their target was actually the same level as the 3 heavenly palaces. Moreover, this fellow, why did he not look like a living person? However, he did not look like a dead person, much less a spirit. What was going on? The 3 rulers' vision was incomparable to an ordinary person's. They had instantly noticed the peculiarity of King Yama's concourse of the underworld's cultivation method. The chilly wind, the gloomy clouds, and the air that obscured one's vision, it was not an ordinary cultivation method. How could they not be suspicious? Yin-Yang obviously knew about these questions, but why had he never mentioned them? For hundreds of thousands of years, there had only been 3 heavenly palaces and at most, Tian Fa, who were qualified to enter the Supreme Heaven Pavilion selection. No other sects were qualified. It was only when the residence of 9 Supremes rose and became the Palace of 9 Supremes, and when Yin-Yang became a saint and attained the level of a ruler that the Palace of 9 Supremes truly became another organization that was qualified to participate in the Supreme Heaven Pavilion selection. How could another one suddenly appear? Yin-Yang said, "Sai, your cultivation methods are unique. Although they point to the path of Tao, there's another end to them. If you really continue on this path, I'm afraid you won't be able to return to the mortal realm anymore. I know that my brothers have long known this and no longer have any doubts, but do you have any regrets? I can help." King Yenluo's voice grew deeper. Lord Supreme Cloud is still wise and far-sighted. After this selection, we'll really. Sai, what's the point of saying all that? Brother Yun, we have you and your sect in the mortal realm anyway. If we have any needs, we'll naturally come to you. We won't hold back. Yin-Yang was beaming. Well said, it's good that you won't hold back. I have about 10 chi of Yin here. Remember to bring them back for your brothers in your return. Chi of Yin? King Yenluo exclaimed in delight. Great. That's great. Brother Yun, how did you know that we're lacking this now? Do you have any more? How many more? We really need this. This fellow was really blunt. Yin-Yang laughed without feeling offended and said, I'll try my best to gather them. However, this is something that the world of the living doesn't have, and it's even more taboo. I think we can only get 15 at most. Any more and it'll be impossible. 15? That's more than enough. King Yenluo guffawed, obviously overjoyed. We couldn't control it for now, but with this chi of Yin, at most a year later, you know. Yin-Yang's expression was one of understanding. Of course, ha ha ha, but Tianxian continent, old Marshal Qiu, old Mistress Shangguan, old Grand Commandant Fang, you all know them, King Yenluo guffawed. I didn't hear anything. What did you say just now? I didn't say anything. Yin-Yang chortled, overjoyed. Dongfang Haoran was dumbfounded. What did they say? I didn't understand a single word. Shiman Haoran repeated, yes, I heard every word and understood them, but I don't know what they meant. Beigong Lioli was speechless. I thought both of you knew and waited for you to explain. In the end, both of you farted one after another. It's so smelly, it's all **T, they seem to have some sort of shady deal. I think so too, but I don't understand. At this moment, the golden light on the other side surged again. The golden bridges beneath everyone's feet solidified, revealing a plaque on each bridge. Lai Kuangfeng was the first to move, writing on the plaque, East Celestial Palace, Lai Kuangfeng. With the last stroke, the 7 words suddenly glowed with a dazzling golden light. Then, Lai Kuangfeng disappeared along with the plaque. Western Heaven Holy Palace, Feng Padian. Northern Wasteland Demonic Palace, Mirage Abyss. Northern Wasteland Demonic Palace, Lanting. Tian Fa Holy Land, Ingli the Man in Grey, King Yenluo, wrote, Concourse of the Underworld, Yama. Yin-Yang thought about it and wrote, Yin-Yang. He only wrote a name but did not fill in the Palace of 9 Supremes. Still, the golden light shone brightly and disappeared. When the 7 people were gone, the golden bridge retracted abruptly and disappeared with a swoosh, as if it had never existed. The golden light that was still spinning dimmed as well. Everything went smoothly, and everyone went in. Only then did Dongfang Haoran turn his head in confusion. There are strange things every year, but not as many as this year. This old man has never seen such a strange thing in his life. With Yun Yang as an anomaly, everything is strange. What I'm more concerned about is that man in gray. What kind of organization is that King Yen Luo and Concourse of the Underworld? Yun Yang seems to be very serious about it, and he's trying to befriend them. It's definitely extraordinary. Why do you think Yun Yang went in directly without writing his sect? When did that Concourse of the Underworld come out? They have the qualification to enter the Supreme Heaven Pavilion, but I've never heard of them before. This is unbelievable. The three of them looked at each other, countless questions stuck in their chests, almost suffocating them to the point of illness. The three of them had always boasted that they were experts who had everything in the world under their control. Who would have thought that so many things that they did not know about would happen today? It was truly strange. Only 3,700 words today, 300 left to be filled tomorrow. GT. Chapter 1445. Everyone who entered the Supreme Heaven Pavilion had different experiences and each had their own future. Yin Yang felt his vision blur before he found himself in a strange space. As he looked around, Yin Yang saw countless stars shining densely above his head, but there was only a weak light in front of him. He could barely see, but when he stretched out his hand, he could not see his fingers. It was so dark that he could not even see his own fingers. However, he could feel a sense of stability beneath his feet. At this moment and place, the power of his deific consciousness had been completely blocked. Even Yun Yang's saint-level deific consciousness was completely suppressed and rendered useless. His cultivation base and mystical qi were still surging and flowing, but he could not use any of it at all. Fortunately, his martial artist's intuition was still there. Yin Yang could clearly feel that his surroundings were empty, as if no one else was nearby. It looks like everyone won't gather together after coming in, but will go their own way. Why would Dongfang Haoran and the rest be worried that I would harm their disciples? At this moment, a scream came from afar, but the sound was distant, as if it came from a different time and space. That sounds like the sound of Lai Kuangfeng. Yin Yang was stunned. What had he encountered? Why hadn't he encountered anything? As he pondered, the faint light in front of him changed subtly. Looking towards the direction of the light, a small path appeared, and the other end of the path seemed to be a flight of stairs. Was that a flight of stairs? Did they not say that the way to enter the Supreme Heaven Pavilion was to go up the stairs step by step? Was that the way? Yin Yang did not doubt it and walked towards the light. He had only taken 2 steps when a gust of wind suddenly blew. 2 silhouettes formed from spiritual fog appeared on both sides of him, attacking him with a strong gust of wind. Although Yin Yang had mystical qi that was at the pinnacle of this world and his internal breath was surging, he was restricted by the current atmosphere and could not use it. He could only defend himself against the attack. Bam, 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 punches, kicks, palms, and legs rained down on Yin Yang like raindrops. Yin Yang frowned, but his frown soon relaxed. What? They could not break through his defense at all. Yin Yang knew that he would lose if he continued to defend, so he did not slow down. Braving the rain-like blows, he strode forward. Bang 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 bang, Yin Yang stood firm like a mountain as he strode forward. With each step he took, the attacking shadows on both sides would dissipate abruptly, turning into spiritual fog that melted into Yun Yang's body. About a dozen steps forward, Yun Yang had already come to the front of the first step. It was also after arriving at this position that Yun Yang could clearly feel that his cultivation base had increased by 10% in this short stretch of road. Do not underestimate a mere 10% improvement. Any cultivator who improved their cultivation base by 10% was no different from being reborn, as if they were a completely different person. Furthermore, Yun Yang had now advanced to the saint level. 10% of a saint cultivator's cultivation base was equivalent to the full cultivation base of a third-level saint lord. He had only walked a few dozen steps in total, yet he had such a huge improvement. It was not just a miracle, it was simply a miracle. A sign more miraculous than a miracle. If it wasn't a miracle, then what was it? Walking to the front of the steps, Yun Yang, who realized his improvement, felt a little regretful. Why did he not walk slower? Why did he take such big strides? Fortunately, this miracle was far from the end. According to Dongfang Haoran and the others, there were still a few more sections and levels to go. Yin Yang continued his journey forward, lifting his foot gently to step on the first step. Just as his foot touched the ground, he felt a piercing pain at the bottom of his foot. It felt like there were hundreds and thousands of needles piercing into his bones. The pain was excruciating and penetrated deep into his bones. Yin Yang sucked in a deep breath. Without changing his original intention, he stepped on the step without hesitation, firm and steady. When both his feet landed on the first step at the same time, the pain of his feet being pierced by thousands of needles multiplied. The excruciating pain that penetrated deep into his bones could no longer be described. It was as if his soul was convulsing. His heart was in turmoil, but Yun Yang's expression did not change. He continued to walk up step by step without hesitation, taking big strides forward steadily and steadily. Yin Yang climbed up the 9 steps steadily. Not only did his expression change, even his gaze did not change. At the same time, Lai Kuangfeng and the others were either in the passageway before the stairs or on the stairs. Their screams rose and fell. It wasn't that they wanted to lose their composure, it was just that it was too painful. It was so painful that they couldn't bear it at all. Screaming was the only effective way for them to vent or reduce their own sensations. What they needed right now wasn't to block it, but to persevere. Furthermore, they had only passed the first step. With each step they went up, the pain would only intensify. Mountains of blades and seas of fire came one after another, and they could not use any cultivation base to resist the pain. They had to endure it with their bodies. Was this the path that a human should take? Not only them, but King Yama was also cursing on the other side of the stairs. F***ck, I'm a soul without a physical body now. Physical attacks should be completely useless against me, but what's the feeling of my soul being pierced like this? In spite of this, King Yama's situation was obviously much better than the other 4. He had already reached the 7th level and was about to go up. Other than Yun Yang, the one who had the easiest time was not King Yama, but the Eagle King. The Eagle King was a mystical beast, so his physical body was much stronger than a human's. Now that he had transformed into his true form, the form of an eagle, his resistance was even stronger. Although he could not spread his wings and soar, the area that his talons had to bear was much smaller than the others, so the pain he had to endure was naturally reduced. One of Yun Yang's feet was already on the 9th step. He could already see the boundless fog of the 2nd level. However, just as his other foot was about to leave the 9th step, there was a sudden rumble from above. A gigantic foot was coming towards him. Yin Yang was already prepared for this. Both his hands were placed in front of his eyes, blocking the incoming force. Although his body could not help but lean back, both his feet had still stepped into the 2nd level. Then, his body was suspended in the air for a moment before he turned back bit by bit. Yin Yang thought to himself that it was a close shave. If it were not for Dongfang Haoran's warning, he might have failed miserably just now and lost the selection. Stepping onto the 2nd level and taking his first step, there were indeed spiritual fog assassins coming at him from both sides. The sounds of attacks rang again, but he was still passively receiving the attacks without being able to retaliate. In spite of this, Yin Yang deliberately slowed down his pace. He allowed the spiritual fog assassins to attack him. Such a state of slowing down was like, I've always lifted my foot, but I have to take a long time before I can land my foot. I'm only moving bit by bit, at most, I'm just a little slower. I'll let you guys hit me all you want. Then, Yin Yang realized that the light in the 2nd level was much brighter, causing the surroundings to appear hazy. It was a stark contrast to the time when he could not even see his own fingers in front of him. He could even see white spots protruding from the ground at the bottom of the steps in front of him. Other than the path that was illuminated by the light, the surroundings were extremely empty, there was no end in sight. It was as if there were 9 steps slanted eerily on a boundless plain, connecting to another space. Just as Yun Yang's first step was about to land on the ground, the Eagle King was the first to pop his head out from the other side. He was at the same level as Yun Yang. Once he appeared, he cried out, "It hurts so much." Then, he plopped down on the ground and reverted to his human form, massaging his feet without any intention of moving forward. A moment later, King Yanluo jumped up. No wonder they refused to come. They have to suffer like this. It's tormenting me to death. He then began to rub his feet as well, all over his body, everywhere. I feel like I'm being dismembered. Half a cup of tea's time later, Lai Kuangfeng and the others popped their heads out as well, their lips pale and their faces pale. They were shivering from head to toe as they rubbed their bodies to activate their blood vessels, just like Ying Yan and Yun Yang. When they finally caught their breaths and looked at Yun Yang, who was being beaten up, their faces were filled with gloating and even a tinge of relief. "We thought you were so awesome, you should have gone to the 3rd level by now, but you're still dawdling here. Look at your movements, you can't even take a step forward after a long time." It's the textbook version of difficulty in taking a step forward. When the few of them felt that they had rested enough and began to move forward against the beating, Yun Yang had only taken his 4th step. After a while, Huan Wenyuan and the others could not help but feel motivated when they saw that Yun Yang was still stuck in the initial stage of difficulty. There was only 1 flight of steps leading up on the 2nd level. Some were near while others were far away, and Yun Yang was right in the middle. Seeing that Yun Yang seemed to be at a disadvantage, the few of them gathered their strength and pushed forward bravely against the beating. Not long after, they rushed to Yun Yang's front. Among them, Huan Wenyuan was the furthest in front. He was the first to step on the end of the flight of steps, at the protruding spot that was glowing white on the ground. Just as Huan Wenyuan touched the protruding spot, he suddenly slipped and fell to the ground. Then, many spirit fog men swarmed up from the side, punching and kicking even more ferociously than before. Huan Wenyuan was sent flying from the ground. As he floated in the air, he was beaten up along the way. Hoo, he was beaten all the way back. Along the way back, Huan Wenyuan's screams were heart-wrenching and heart-wrenching. It was truly a tragic sight. This round of beatings continued until he arrived at the entrance of the staircase on the 1st floor before finally stopping. As soon as he arrived there, the numerous spirit mist men that had attacked him in groups had suddenly vanished, and they transformed back into dense mist. However, Huan Wenyuan was already bruised and swollen, no longer in human form. During this period of time, the spiritual fog that had seeped into his body during the journey to the 2nd level had all come out. It was unknown whether it was forcefully extracted or stripped away for some other reason. But in the end, it was equivalent to being beaten up for nothing. Huan Wenyuan was moaning on the ground. His eyes were so swollen that there was only a slit left. His entire body looked like it had been cut by 1,000 knives. His strong and straight body swelled up at a speed visible to the naked eye. In an instant, he had become a big fat man. The others were stunned when they saw the change. They were so frightened that they did not dare to take another step forward. Brother Huan, Lai Kuangfeng's position was also relatively close to the white protruding point. Seeing Huan Wenyuan's miserable state, he was so frightened that he retracted his foot. However, as he retracted his foot, the spiritual fog energy that he had absorbed was reduced by 1/3, and it came out of his body with a whoosh. However, he did not care about this at this moment. He asked in a deep voice, "Brother Huan, what's the situation?" Huan Wenyuan groaned and said while lying on the ground, "That protruding stone is very strange. Not only is it slippery, but it also has an abnormally strong rotational force. The harder you step on it, the harder it is to stand firmly." Hearing this, the few of them immediately became even more cautious. The wind-piercing sky arrow, who was the closest, had no choice but to shoot. His left foot stabilized his body with 1,000 kilograms drop, and his right foot tentatively stepped on it. Everyone watched the subsequent development attentively. They obviously wanted to see the clues and make sure that they could succeed in one fell swoop when they stepped on it. At the right time, Feng Potion's right foot touched the white light like a dragonfly skimming on the water. Then, Feng Potion's whole body spun in the air like a top. After spinning a dozen or so times, his whole body prostrated on the ground, face down. This was the classic famous technique, dog gnawing style. Feng Patian had just let out a muffled groan when he was already sent flying by the group of spirit mist people. As he was beaten, the spiritual fog energy that his body had absorbed was also beaten out. Just like Huan Wenyuan, Feng Patian was beaten back to the staircase like a kite with its string cut. Following in Huan Wenyuan's footsteps, his entire body was swollen like a big fatty. Everyone was dumbstruck and speechless. "What's going on?" Eagle King asked loudly. "The lighter the force, the greater the rebound and slip force," Feng Patian muttered. His words were unclear. Most likely, all his teeth had been beaten out, so he really couldn't speak clearly. Hearing this, everyone was completely stunned. It didn't work to step on it, and it didn't work to touch it lightly either. What was he supposed to do? Next, Lai Guangfeng and Lan Ting tested it separately, but they were also beaten back in an instant. The four of them sprawled on the ground, their bodies swollen. They looked at each other. Back then, their master and the others had even gone up to the third level. Could it be that they could only stop at the second level? However, this slippery stone, how could they pass it? For a time, no one dared to move rashly, and the sounds of beating couldn't help but grow louder. The few of them fell into the awkward situation of being beaten on the spot, unable to move an inch. However, Lan Ting and the others would rather be beaten than move forward. All of them turned to look at Yun Yang. King Yenluo chuckled. His body was beaten until the fog was seeping out, but he still chuckled and said, "Lord Supreme Cloud, why don't you try it first? Help us open the way?" Yun Yang rolled his eyes. "Why don't you let me try it first when there's something good?" King Yenluo chuckled. "You're strong, how can we compare to you? Not just me, these young brothers here are also waiting for you to explore the way for us. After all, you're this." As he spoke, he gave a thumbs up. Lan Ting took the opportunity to flatter Yun Yang. "Lord Supreme Cloud, before we came in, Master has repeatedly instructed that everything should be decided by Lord Supreme Cloud. This young one will be eternally grateful if Lord Supreme Cloud can bear the burden." "Thank you, Lord Supreme Cloud," the others said in unison. "All right, I'll go and try now." Yun Yang did not waste any more time. Instead, he picked up his pace and walked over while enduring the beating of the spirit fog man. Before this drastic change in attitude, he strode forward with large strides, his body unwavering. The spirit fog man's beatings did not seem to affect him at all. Bam, 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 Yun Yang sprinted all the way and reached the end of the stairs in no time. One more step and he would be at the glowing white stone. Everyone's eyes were glued to him. Chapter 1446. At this moment, everyone looked nervous as they stared at Yun Yang without blinking. If Yun Yang was unable to do anything to Bai Tudian, then all of them would probably perish here. The honor selection this time would be like a broken halberd sinking into the sand, ending prematurely. Yun Yang's expression was still indifferent as he said as he walked, "Although this place is eerie and everything is unexpected, it's not impossible to break through. Didn't your masters pass through here as well? Since they could pass through, it means that there's a way. It's just that you haven't thought of it yet. If I'm not mistaken, the rock's rotation force isn't because of its slippery appearance, but because it's constantly rotating at a high speed. When you're in an unfamiliar place and you know that the object in front of you is the key to the test. I'm really curious. Why don't all of you test it first? The simplest way is to have your feet on the ground and touch it with your hands. Is it that difficult?" As Yun Yang spoke, he straightened his legs like a pine tree and bent down to touch the glowing white protrusion with his hand. As soon as he touched it, a rapidly rotating force came, but Yun Yang, who was already prepared, had already retracted his hand at once. He was not being tested at all. My idea is correct. The rock spins on its own and at an extremely fast speed. There are a total of 27 rocks here, surrounding this first step. I'm guessing that the other rocks' rotation directions are very likely to be completely different. He extended his hand again to touch the other glowing white rocks. Touching the nearest 4 to 5 rocks, he said, up until now, all the rocks I've touched have been rotating at a high speed. 2 adjacent rocks are rotating in the opposite direction. The speed of these rocks' rotation is about the same. They can spin hundreds and thousands of times in an instant. Even if you can handle one, it's inevitable that you'll lose your balance when it comes to the second. However, if you can make use of the counterforce, there'll be other opportunities. Yin Yang extended both his hands at the same time and pressed them against the 2 rocks next to each other, saying faintly, like this, I don't even need to exert much strength to stop these 2 rocks from spinning. I only need to make sure that the rocks themselves are smooth. Yin Yang shook his head speechlessly and said, I don't know how the 3 heavenly palaces teach their disciples, but if it were the palace of 9 Supreme's disciples, they might not be able to pass this stair easily, but at least 7 or 8 out of 10 of them would pass safely after testing it out. This little bit of caution and adaptability is really not enough. The personal disciples of the 3 hegemons were all flushed red to the ears. They were so ashamed that they couldn't speak. It was too embarrassing. Yin Yang was right. The logic was extremely simple. In such a strange place, he really had to be careful. Just because he couldn't use his mental strength didn't mean that he was blind and deaf. He could see, hear, and touch anything, right? However, he and the others had stepped on it without any hesitation. In this test, stepping on it with one's feet and touching it with one's hands were obviously 2 different choices. No matter how confident one was, when one's foot left the ground, one's center of gravity would definitely be lost. At this point, one's body would be in the most precarious position. How could one not fall into the trap that the seniors had purposely set up to target this? Yin Yang stood up and smiled faintly. He smiled faintly. Being acquainted with the palace lords of the 3 great heavenly palaces, he could be said to be giving advice to their disciples. No matter what, it was more than enough. Then, Yin Yang leaped up lightly and landed on the 2 rocks next to each other. The 2 rocks that were spinning at high speed stopped spinning immediately due to the counteracting force, leaving only the smooth surface of the rocks. How could they do anything to Yun Yang? After Yun Yang stood firmly, he quickly leaped again, landing on the 2 rocks at the same time. With 3 consecutive leaps, he was already in front of the stairs. In the next moment, Yun Yang's feet were already on the first step of the stairs that would leave this floor. Just as Yun Yang leaped up, he suddenly felt a piercing pain coming from both his feet at the same time, like thousands of steel needles stabbing into them. At the same time, a ray of light shot into his Baihui acupoint from the top of his head. It was a ray of starlight glowing in his head, flowing down his meridians in a manner that could still be seen clearly from an outsider's point of view. This scene was far more than just a spectacular sight, it was simply horrifying and shocking to the eyes. At that moment, Yun Yang felt as if his legs had turned into minced meat, unable to stand straight. The golden light above his head felt as if it was about to split his body into 2 halves. He gritted his teeth and did not make a sound, maintaining his clarity of mind to deal with it calmly. However, the pain that was beyond his limits had caused his face to pale. After a while, the starlight flowed freely in Yun Yang's meridians like a red-hot iron bar. From his head down, through his neck, shoulders, and all the way down, through his waist and right thigh, all the way to the tip of his right toe, before disappearing. Throughout the process, Yun Yang could not move at all and could only endure it passively. The feeling was even more excruciating than being sliced into pieces. He endured it with all his might, trying his best to maintain a straight face. He did not even frown, but he was already drenched in sweat, drenching his clothes. Fortunately, the excruciating pain that was beyond his own limits only lasted for a moment before it disappeared. Yin-yang, who was no longer in pain, looked like he had been reborn. He exhaled deeply, his breath tinged with a faint red hue. He did not move but said faintly, "The training you have to endure here is far more intense than before. Every step you take requires extreme agony. It's an agony that surpasses the cycle of life and death. Quit if you can't bear it. If you force yourself, it'll damage your will severely. The loss outweighs the gain." Yin-yang did not stop after he finished speaking. He lifted his left foot and took a steady step forward, ignoring the pain that felt like needles pricking his foot. His right foot did not stop at the same time as it went up to a higher step. At the same time, another ray of starlight arrived at the same time. It was still from above, embedded into the skull from the Baihui acupoint, and traveled down along the meridians. However, this time, the route of the meridians was different from the previous one. This time, the end point was the second toe of the right foot, and then it disappeared just like the previous one. Although Yin-yang was mentally prepared and had the previous experience, he was still sweating profusely. There was a faint stench mixed in with the sweat. Yin-yang was surprised. He had had many fortuitous encounters in the past. His physical body, blood, and meridians had been reborn many times, and he had recently advanced to the level of a saint. His current physical body might not be flawless, but it should at least be free of impurities. How could his sweat have such a smell? Unless the golden starlight had something else to it that enhanced his physical body and improved it further. As Yin-yang's thoughts raced, he calmed himself down to sense his own condition. He was shocked to find that the two meridians that had experienced the flow of starlight had undergone a subtle change. Other than becoming tougher than before, there was a faint glimmer of golden light in the meridians, but nothing more could be seen when he looked within himself. In spite of this, Yin-yang still came to a shocking conclusion: his meridians were at least twice as tough as before. They were at least twice as tough as before. Such an improvement was more than shocking, it was simply unheard of and unbelievable. Yin-yang stepped onto the higher third step in silence. This time, two rays of golden light shone down at the same time. The meridians from his head to the third and fourth toes of his right foot were opened up one after another. Just like that, Yin-yang walked up one step at a time without stopping, determined and unwavering. In the end, from the top of his head to his toes, and even his facial features, eyes, ears, nostrils, and even his tailbone, all the blind spots and sharp points on his body, the golden starlight passed through them. When he stood on the third step, Yin-yang felt like he had walked through the 18 levels of hell, 10 times, or even 100 times. Just as Yin-yang exhaled, he could not help chuckling softly and said, "After going through this ordeal, I believe that I can get through the cruelest punishment in this world with a smile. Even if my soul disintegrates, my expression won't change so easily." Down below, Huan Wenyuan and the others were all pale as they stared at Yin-yang in awe. Listening to Yin-yang's introductions and imparting his experiences to them, how could they not know that this was Yin-yang's intention? There was no need for Yin-yang to do so. Even if the Temple of Nine Supremes and the three celestial palaces were doing business, there was still a hidden competition in the long run. Yin-yang's detailed introduction was equivalent to pointing out a clear path for them. They told themselves that as long as they could endure it, they would be able to move forward, there would be no obstacles. The result of such an approach would only benefit them and the three celestial palaces greatly. It was a disguised form of aiding the enemy. Everyone understood this and could not help but feel grateful. The four of them bowed in gratitude. "Thank you, Senior Uncle Yun, for your guidance." Before this, they had still addressed him as Lord Supreme Cloud, but now, they were willing to call him Senior Uncle Yun. Obviously, they had acknowledged Yin-yang's position as being on par with the lords of the three celestial palaces. Yin-yang waved his hand, and with a flash of his body, he did not waste any more words, nor did he linger. He moved forward in the third level without further ado. Then, the sound of flesh being beaten came from above, but it only lasted for 2 moments before it was no longer heard. Then, on the second level, King Yenluo's gray shadow flashed and was the first to stand on the first two protruding rocks. Following Yun Yang's demonstration, he did not slip and reached the end easily. King Yenluo had made up his mind that when he stepped on those few steps, he would follow Yun Yang's example and not make a single sound. When he soared again, both his feet flew up and landed on the first step. Then, a heart-wrenching scream escaped King Yenluo's mouth uncontrollably, piercing to the ears. The cry was so loud and tragic that it caused the others, including the Eagle King, to shiver uncontrollably. This scream was not only mournful, but it also lasted for a long time. It lasted until the golden light came out from his toes. Only then did King Yenluo's scream come to an end. Following that, he panted heavily. His pale face that was hidden in the gray fog could be seen. Huan Wenyuan shuddered again when he saw this. Exchanging glances with the others, they all saw the fear in each other's eyes. To be able to come this far, which one of them was not the cream of the crop? Which one of them was not a ruthless character who would not frown even if they were attacked? Being highly skilled, they might occasionally be careless, but when it came to individual willpower, it was always commendable. Yin Yang had been drenched in sweat as he walked down the stairs just now. It was obvious to everyone that the process must have been excruciating, but Yin Yang had not made a single sound. Huan Wenyuan and the others felt that even if the process was excruciating, they could still persevere. Even if they were not as good as Yin Yang, it would not be too difficult. However, when they heard King Yenluo's scream just now, their hearts were in their throats. What kind of pain could make a strong person like King Yenluo, a king, cry out so melodiously? Then, they saw King Yenluo suddenly jump up to the second level. At that moment, that familiar screech rang out uncontrollably once more. It was still a long and continuous sound. The four men and the eagles' faces turned pale. F***ck, even after experiencing it for the first time, I still can't bear it. This pain is extraordinary, it's terrifying. What they did not know was that King Yenluo was also angry at himself. He was not prepared for the first level, so he could only cry out, but he could not cry out for the second level. Who would have thought that just as he went up, before his brain could react, his mouth had already cried out involuntarily. In the end, he simply gave up. Since he had already lost all face, he could cry out if he wanted to. At least he had another channel to vent his pain. It had to be said that once a person's sense of shame was gone, he could no longer keep his mouth shut. He could do anything he wanted. When he reached the third and fourth level, King Yenluo could no longer restrain himself. He let out a full-throated cry. The cries became more and more melodious, lingering for 3 days, still echoing endlessly. At this time, Yin Yang's scolding voice came from above, F***ck. What are you screaming for? Those who know that you're challenging the levels, those who don't would think that you're in a brothel. Pfft. Cough, cough, his words made Lanting and the others burst out in laughter. King Yenluo's dark face was flushed red, which was a sight to behold. Yin Yang, who was on the third level, walked forward step by step. What he had to endure now was still the familiar mobbing routine. However, the force of the mobbing was more than twice as strong as it was in the 2 levels below. Yin Yang could clearly feel that his cultivation base had increased by another 10% after going through the 3rd level's ganging up. In addition, this was a full 10% increase after going through the 1st level. The increased mystical chi and spiritual power resonated with the flowing spiritual fog, surging endlessly like a tsunami. If I can get to the 5th level, I might be on par with Dongfang Haoran and the others after I leave with such a speed of advancement, Yin Yang calculated in his heart. His eyes were glowing as he looked at the stairs from the 3rd to the 4th level. I wonder who has such godly means to build this exalted heaven pavilion here. The word exalted truly lives up to its name. The 2 words heaven pavilion complement each other as well, surpassing this world and standing at a strategically advantageous position. As he pondered, he could not help thinking about the position of exalted heaven in the cultivation base level. Yin Yang had another epiphany. Exalted heaven in mystical Qi perhaps refers to the status of a human emperor. Although they have the title of exalted heaven, they can only reign supreme in the human realm. They are the exalted heaven in the human realm. Above the exalted heaven is the venerable realm. To the human realm, the venerable realm is to transcend the mundane and become a figure of myth, legend, or even deity. However, in the path of cultivation, it is only the starting point of the second stage. Beyond that, it is to transcend the mundane and enter sainthood. To become a saint, there is naturally a king among the saints, the king among the kings. Hence, there are saint kings and saint emperors. Then, the level of Saint Venerable is another starting point that has broken away from the levels. As for the saint, it is another extreme, the pinnacle of this world, the saint. To ascend to heaven, the saint must first be a person. If my guess is correct, the path of a higher level should be another starting point with the saint. Yin Yang could not help but feel even more impressed as his imagination ran wild. The names of the martial arts levels were not just a name, but they also contained great wisdom. Chapter 1447. Yin Yang did not know if this was the only setup of Supreme Heaven Pavilion. Anyway, the third level's mystical Qi infusion was no different from before. Other than that, there were no other tricks. Yin Yang could not help but shift his attention to the third level's staircase. According to Dongfang Haoran and the others, they had all fallen at the end of this staircase. They had all been kicked down when they were about to ascend to a higher level. The Heaven Pavilion selection had ended abruptly. Did this mean that from the fourth level onwards, there was no longer a chance of failure? It was no longer like before where there was a chance to try again even if there was an occasional mistake. That would be too much of a risk. Yin Yang stared at the third level staircase. It looked quiet and there was nothing out of the ordinary about it. He could not see any setup at all. Following the principle of being cautious, Yin Yang extended his hand to touch it carefully, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. This made Yin Yang even more vigilant. Yin Yang took a few steps back cautiously, allowing the spirit fog being who had stopped attacking to continue hitting him. He also absorbed the spiritual fog and adjusted his breathing to ensure that he was in the most perfect state so that he could handle any unforeseen circumstances. Only then did he step onto the fourth level. Yin Yang had never been a reckless person. He knew very well that even the slightest flaw in his soul or body could affect the overall situation. This was the logic of a lion using its full strength to catch a rabbit. On the staircase of the third floor, there were still screams that sounded like the wails of ghosts and the howls of gods. King Yanluo had finally reached the top. The Yin mist had dissipated, and his entire body was slumped to the ground, as if he had already turned into a puddle of mud. No matter how the spirit mist figure hit him, he could only gasp for breath, motionless as he absorbed the spiritual energy of the third floor. The next to ascend was the Eagle King. The Eagle King's cry was different from King Yama's. The Eagle King let out a long cry towards the end, sounding even more terrifying than the cuckoo's cries of blood. When it came to Lanting and the others, there were even more miserable cries of every description. Some were soft, some were coarse, some were thick, some were thick, some were soft, some were thick, some were soft, some were like ghosts crying and gods howling. There was not a single one of them. In the end, all of them collapsed on the ground like a puddle of mud without exception, not moving for a long time. Among them, the Eagle King was the most shameless. He directly revealed his true form, lying on the ground in the form of an eagle. His wings were drooping, and his body was drenched in sweat. He looked like an old hen that was about to shed its feathers. It took a long time for the group to catch their breaths and step forward to thank Yin Yang. Thank you, Senior Uncle Yun, for your insightful insight and your earnest guidance. Yin Yang nodded but did not speak again. He needed to maintain himself in his best and most complete state right now. Any nonsense could cause his condition to be incomplete and cause him to fail again. After resting, Lai Kuangfeng was the first to attempt to ascend the stairs to the fourth floor. He didn't really think that he would be able to ascend it, but it was always good to try. There was nothing unusual about the first 6 floors in this attempt. The process was similar to the previous ones. Although it was excruciatingly painful, with the previous experience, he could grit his teeth and endure it. However, when he reached the 7th floor, a silhouette suddenly appeared. A large foot stomped down with a force that seemed to cover the heaven and earth. Lai Kuangfeng cried out loudly as his body was flung away and fell to the ground. Lai Kuangfeng landed on the ground of the 3rd floor with a loud boom. The moment he landed on the ground, countless rays of starlight lit up in the air, forming a complicated diagram that landed on his forehead, forming a mark. Then, Lai Kuangfeng's silhouette suddenly vanished from the 3rd floor of Supreme Heaven Pavilion. Yin Yang understood what had happened when he saw this. His judgment of the 4th floor's setup was mostly correct. Although Lai Kuangfeng had failed, he had already achieved an achievement similar to the current Palace Lord of the East Celestial Palace, Dongfang Haoren. The mark was proof that he had obtained the qualification to inherit the East Celestial Palace. Then, this child would be the Palace Lord after Dongfang Haoren. The next to try was Feng Patian. He was also kicked away in the 7th floor. Although he had learned his lesson from Lai Kuangfeng's mistake and was already on guard against the kick, he was still unable to resist it despite his full strength and fell to the ground. However, he had also obtained the qualification to inherit the West Celestial Palace just like Lai Kuangfeng. After that, Huan Wenyuan and Lanting also failed to pass the 7th floor and were kicked away one after another. Neither of them disappeared immediately. After the stars shone in the air for a while, they made their final choice and the mark fell on Lanting's forehead. Huan Wenyuan laughed and said, "Congratulations, junior brother." He was not the least bit jealous. Instead, he breathed a sigh of relief. Huan Wenyuan had once been very passionate about the position of Palace Lord, but he was even more passionate about strength. When he saw Yun Yang's current achievements, he already had a vague idea in his heart. If he could reach Yun Yang's achievements, even if he did not become Palace Lord, what else could he do? One had to know that after becoming Palace Lord, there would be all sorts of things to do in the future, and his cultivation might not be fast. Now was the time for him to improve by leaps and bounds. Perhaps letting Lanting become Palace Lord was the best choice. "Thank you, senior brother." Lanting obviously understood. Huan Wenyuan's congratulation deepened Lanting's feelings. From now on, there would be no more competition. As soon as they finished speaking, the senior and junior brothers disappeared like Lai Kuangfeng and Lanting Patian. They had obviously been sent out. The Hawk King was slightly stronger than the direct disciples of the 3 rulers. He had been kicked away on the 8th step. He had transformed into the form of a hawk and used an extreme speed movement technique to successfully avoid that tyrannical kick. However, the attack on the 8th step was a level higher, and the range of the attack was even greater. He had no way to display his extreme speed. Just like Huan Wenyuan and the others, he fell to the ground. After obtaining the imprint, he also disappeared. However, the starlight mark he obtained was a little brighter than Lai Kuangfeng and the others. He must have obtained more benefits. At this point, only Yun Yang and King Yama were left in the vast sovereign space. It was not that the 2 of them did not have the opportunity to rush up earlier, but they had deliberately stayed behind. Everyone could see that there was nothing special about the 4th step that was worth paying attention to. What they needed to pay attention to was the sudden attack of the giant foot. "You first, or I?" King Yama looked at Yun Yang. Yun Yang said, "I'll go first." "Thank you," King Yama said. Yun Yang's attempt was equivalent to giving King Yama more experience. King Yama knew that if there was someone who could go up to the sovereign selection, it would be Yun Yang. Now that he had allowed Yun Yang to go up, it was no different than Yun Yang passing on a wave of successful experience to him. This was a huge favor. When Yun Yang stepped onto the 4th step, he did not feel anything strange at first, but when he took another step, he felt like there was a suction force beneath his feet, sucking them in. With each step he took, the suction force increased by 3 times. When he reached the 6th step, the suction force had accumulated to 10 times that of the initial one. I see. When the foot from above came down, my 2 feet were being sucked in by the steps, so I could only take it head-on. The Eagle King dealt with it with his true form, so the suction force under his claws was the weakest. Coupled with his speedy movement skill, he was 1 step ahead of the others. Yun Yang walked up to the 7th step, but the expected attack did not come. He then went up to the 8th step, but there was still no attack. Yun Yang checked himself and made sure that he was in perfect condition before he calmly went up to the 9th step. 1 more step and he was on the 4th step. Could it be that his cultivation base was far superior than the others, that the foot had not attacked? At this moment, a whirlwind blew above his head. A giant foot materialized out of nowhere and came crashing down. Yin Yang arched his body and met the attack head-on. Boom! Both sides clashed head-on in the simplest and most direct way. King Yen Luo, who was below, felt the world spin as if the entire world had been shaken by this attack. He could see stars and could not help but fall to the ground. When he lifted his head, he saw Yun Yang already standing on the 4th step in his purple robe. Beside him, there was still the boundless whirlwind that had just dissipated, like little green snakes that had yet to dissipate completely. It was only after a long time that the green whirlwind finally dissipated. King Yenluo's eyes were filled with shock. Could he have withstood such a kick? The attack of this foot depends on the cultivation base of the individual. The disciples of the 3 rulers and the Eagle King were all attacked at the 7th step. If they couldn't cross over, they would be defeated. It's a pity for the Eagle King. He had already crossed the 7th step to attack. If he could even survive the 8th wave of attack, he would be able to advance further. King Yen Luo, come, use all your strength. King Yen Luo took a deep breath and said, all right. He walked over with his head held high and chest puffed out, ascending the steps step by step. It was only when King Yen Luo reached the 8th step that a foot came crashing down from above. However, Yun Yang, who was already on top, had a change in his gaze. This kick was much weaker than the one he had just now. Even so, King Yen Luo's body was still thrown backward from the kick. His body was parallel in the air, but fortunately, he managed to straighten himself bit by bit. He heaved a long sigh of relief and opened his mouth to spit out a mouthful of blood. He then took another step forward and officially ascended to the 4th step. Congratulations. Yun Yang congratulated him sincerely. King Yen Luo smiled bitterly. It was just luck. My luck can only bless me to reach this step. This is already very good. This is a level that the rulers of the 3 heavenly palaces have never been able to break through since the beginning of time. As expected, King Yen Luo stayed on the 4th step for a moment. When he tried to climb the 5th step, he was pierced through the heart by a sword on the 8th step. When King Yen Luo's silhouette disappeared, a wisp of gloomy mist formed into a strange shape and flew out with him. Then, objects of strange shapes flew onto him as well. Even with Yun Yang's eyesight, he could not see clearly how many of them had flown out. King Yenluo's body had completely disappeared. All that was left was a hurried sentence as he flew out, Lord Supreme Cloud. You must reach the top. Feng Lingtian said, I'm getting lazier and lazier. I've written 7,500 today. I wanted to save this chapter for tomorrow, but I'm afraid that I'll be even lazier tomorrow with this chapter, and my brothers will say that I'm stingy. I might as well post it first. Chapter 1448. His words were still ringing in Yun Yang's ears, but King Yen Luo had already disappeared from this realm. Yun Yang was left alone in the Supreme Heaven Pavilion. Standing on the 4th level and looking at the stairs leading to the 5th level, Yun Yang's gaze was unprecedentedly solemn. He dared not be careless. Unlike the previous levels, the spirit fog man that appeared on this level was no longer simply attacking with his fists and legs. Instead, he was using weapons. The sharpness of the spiritual chi blades was incomparable to the fists and palms. The damage to the physical body was greatly increased, and the attacks were ruthless and exquisite. It was only the first contact, but Yun Yang was already at a disadvantage. He had no choice but to muster all his strength to destroy the spirit fog man wielding the spiritual chi sabers and swords. Yin Yang sucked in a deep breath and pulled out the divine edge quietly. The spirit fog being who had only taken the first step in the fourth level had already forced him to give it his all. If he did not fight back with his saber, he would be courting death. Currently, the lethality of the spiritual chi blades had increased exponentially. It was a situation that no one had ever set foot in or experienced since the beginning of time in the bound of universe. Yin Yang could not be sure where the limit of the spirit fog man's lethality could go, but he dared not fight it with his physical body like before. If the spiritual chi blade's power were beyond imagination, it was not impossible for him to be dismembered by a series of saber and sword attacks. It was better to be careful. Swoosh, 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 clang, clang, Yun Yang stood at the edge of the stairs, not retreating even half a step. The saber in his hand was impenetrable as he moved forward step by step. If one were to look from below, it would look like a mountain of swords and sabers, shrouding Yun Yang in an overwhelming manner. In the surroundings, there were countless saber lights and sword lights that formed out of thin air. They were like mercury that poured onto the ground, penetrating through all the openings that they could find. Yin Yang executed Saber Truth, Destiny Blade, focusing on forcing his way up. He was invincible in front of him, and he was invincible in his heart as well. However, despite being invincible, Yin Yang still felt a sense of pride as if he was going to fight the world alone. The difficulty of this level was unprecedentedly high. For the challengers, it was not related to their cultivation, soul, divine sense, or any other aspect of comprehension. What this level helped them was to strengthen their martial skills from the very foundation. Yin Yang executed the divine edge over and over again, slashing out again and again to protect himself, leaving no openings. Each time he executed it, the result was only half a step forward. He might not be able to advance even half a step further, because after this half a step, he would have to endure even more attacks when he wanted to move forward again. Yin Yang could only swing his saber continuously, defending perfectly and attacking with all his might. But every time he executed the saber will technique of Heaven's will, he felt the pressure from the Supreme Heavenly Pavilion increase by a notch. As the stalemate continued, Yin Yang found it difficult to cope with such a high tempo and high density of consumption, even though he was constantly gaining new insights and experiences. In this helpless situation, Yin Yang could only attack continuously to slow down the man in the fog's attack. Other than the saber will, saber truth, which almost drained his entire cultivation base, so what harm slaughtering the world? His mystical chi would be depleted every time he used the slaughtering the world, and he could only use the endless divine art spiritual energy to withstand it. However, the slaughtering the world could definitely stop the incoming attack temporarily once it was used, allowing Yun Yang to catch his breath and give himself a little more room to breathe. This allowed the endless divine art and saber truth, Destiny Blade to turn more leisurely. When the saber truth, Destiny Blade was fully executed, his mystical chi would be more or less recovered. It was fortunate that he had 2 cultivation method systems and 2 sets of famous techniques. Otherwise, he might not have been able to hold on. The 4th level's setup is simply bullying. Yin Yang gritted his teeth and charged forward with all his might, cursing inwardly. With the current intensity of the attack, the King of Hell would not even be able to stand on the 1st step, let alone the 7th step. If it were Yin Yang, however, the force would be just as strong. Was this not bullying? The force of the oncoming attack was too strong, there was almost no room for resistance. Yin Yang, who was directly involved, could clearly feel that his saber skill was showing an extraordinary improvement under the pressure that surpassed his limits. Often, he could unleash a new understanding of a technique that his thoughts could not reach with a wave of his hand. In spite of this, the attack on the steps was changing at every moment. As Yin Yang grew stronger, so did the attacks. Yin Yang, who had always been slightly weaker, could do nothing but stare helplessly, unable to pass. The stalemate lasted for a full 2 hours. Yun Yang, who had expended a tremendous amount of effort and felt as if his body had been emptied many times over, finally reached the 8th level. He stayed there for 4 hours, swinging his saber without stopping. There was no purpose, just for the sake of swinging his saber. It was not until a moment of inspiration flashed in his mind, or perhaps the saber in his hand had inexplicably broken through a realm of saber, that Yun Yang finally stepped forward again, stepping into the 9th level zone. By the time Yun Yang's 2 feet reached the 5th level, he was no longer radiant or reborn. Instead, he had turned into a pile of mud, just short of collapsing on the ground. Even though he was trying his best to maintain his standing posture, he knew his condition the best. He could clearly feel that every inch of his bones had become as soft as cotton, especially his arms. He could not even lift up his saber. If it were not for the fact that the spirit fog people around him had stopped attacking and turned into dense spiritual chi to forcefully infuse into his powerless body, Yun Yang would probably have collapsed on the ground. Emmy, the constant cheat, was also exhausted. The spiritual chi blade formation that it faced earlier was very different from before. There was no spiritual chi to replenish itself, and it relied on Emmy to extract a large amount of mystical chi from its deific consciousness space to replenish itself. The dense spiritual chi that gathered now was probably the reward for successfully withstanding the spiritual chi blade attack. The soreness throughout his body had long reached its peak. Just as he was relieved from the previous attack, the strong attack came again. His mind was swollen and dizzy. It was a sign of overusing his brain. It's only 9 steps, but I've swung my saber more than 1,000,000 times when I charged up. Yun Yang thought about it and felt that the number was rather shocking. What kind of cruel training was this? Despite the rapid improvement, to the point where Yun Yang felt like he had ascended to heaven in a single bound, he did not want to go through such a cultivation process again, even with Yun Yang's tolerance level. At least, he did not want to go through it again in a short period of time. 1,000,000 full-force swings. If it were not for his saint cultivation base, the advancement of his previous cultivation base, and Emmy's replenishment, he would have died of exhaustion many times over if he were a Saint Lord cultivator or a half-saint cultivator instead. It had been too long since Yun Yang had felt this feeling of exhaustion, but he had felt it too many times just now. It was a state where he could fall into a deep slumber if he closed his eyes. Once he fell asleep, it meant that he had failed. He could only focus more on the fight, and as he fought, he would realize that he was no longer tired. Then, he would start to feel exhausted again in a very short period of time. If I really kill people, even if I only kill one person with each slash, I'll have to kill at least 1,000,000 people today. Yun Yang felt his right arm that seemed to have completely lost contact with him and chuckled bitterly. It was no wonder that the Supreme Heaven Pavilion selection was so difficult. No one had ever passed it since the beginning of time in the bound of universe. There were no unexpected checkpoints, no competitors, and no special design. But from the moment he entered, he felt that there was nothing special about it. However, from the moment he entered, the test had already begun. It was a challenge of endurance in all aspects. Physical body, soul, deific consciousness. It was a challenge of endurance in all aspects. Towards the end, it was no longer a simple test of endurance. There was also comprehension, the comprehension of one's cultivation method and techniques. Temperament, intelligence, perseverance, comprehension. It was impossible to lack any one of them. For the first time in Yun Yang's life, he had cultivated to a point where he did not even want to continue. One could only imagine the weight of this. When he stepped into the boundary of the 5th level, Yun Yang could not help but feel the importance of accumulation. There was no other reason. After Yun Yang had recovered his cultivation base, he had calmed himself down and allowed the rich spiritual chi to settle in his body for a full 16 hours. It was not that Yun Yang did not want to continue to cultivate and reap more benefits, but the rich spiritual chi was not truly endless. After 16 hours of forceful infusion, there was no more of it. It was gone. Or perhaps, it had been completely used up. The spiritual chi blade earlier was extremely exhausting, Was this to make up for the depletion? My current cultivation base, be it my deific consciousness, mystical chi, or spiritual power, has increased by at least a fold compared to when I first stepped into the first level of Supreme Heaven Pavilion. In terms of combat power, the increment is even greater, at least 3 times. Yun Yang had always been clear about his own ability. After a comprehensive assessment, his current assessment was not blindly arrogant. In fact, this assessment of 3 times was actually a humble way of saying it. I wonder what should I train in the 6th level? Yin Yang focused on the staircase that connected the 5th and 6th levels. Perhaps the spiritual fog had really been depleted just now, that was why there was no reaction when he reached the staircase. Yin Yang was still trying carefully, pressing lightly on the first step with one hand. There was nothing out of the ordinary. As Yin Yang pondered, he stood in front of the staircase to calm himself down. After adjusting his condition, he finally took a step forward. However, there was still no change until he reached the 9th step. The situation stunned Yin Yang and he did not know what to do. He didn't encounter anything and easily reached the 6th floor. Other than the forceful infusion of spiritual chi, there was no other setup or test between the 5th and 6th levels. There was no checkpoint. This realization made Yun Yang feel like he was dreaming. How could this be? He had already decided to endure 3 days and 3 nights on this staircase. Yet, there was nothing at all. It was like, he had already taken off his pants but you did not prepare anything for him. What were you thinking? However, how could he not move forward when there was a smooth path ahead? He easily ascended to the 6th floor. When he stood on the 6th level, however, Yun Yang was even more bewildered. It was within his expectations. The spiritual fog figures that were everywhere did not appear. There were no blades of spiritual chi nor were there any kicks and punches. Could it be that he had absorbed too much spiritual chi on the 5th level just now and the excessive consumption had caused no spiritual fog figures to fight on the 6th level? An extremely strange conclusion popped up in Yin Yang's heart. However, as he looked around, he gradually calmed down. What he saw around him were walls that were no different from an ordinary tower. The space of the 6th level could be seen in a single glance. The staircase to the 7th level was not far away, it only took 3 steps to reach it. Strange. Looking at everything on the 6th level, Yun Yang dared not be careless. He searched bit by bit, but after repeated checks, there was indeed nothing, not even a speck of dust. Yun Yang turned around swiftly. He saw that in a corner that he had just patrolled, there was actually a desk that had appeared. It was a very, very small study table, just like the table that a 3-year-old child would sit on. Behind the table was a small stool. What is this? Yin Yang walked over cautiously, step by step. He instantly realized that the key to the 6th level was probably on this study table and stool. When Yin Yang was within 3 feet of the study table, almost within reach of his hand, suddenly, a clear voice rang out, "What are you looking at?" Yin Yang was taken aback. Then, he saw a person appear out of thin air on the small stool in front of the study table. It was a child who looked to be only 3 or 4 years old. A little boy. At this very moment, the child was staring at him with a pair of big, innocent eyes that had a clear distinction between black and white. Yin Yang felt his mind blur. Suddenly, a thought popped into his head. Did he know this child? However, Yin Yang could not recall any impression or memory of this child, no matter how hard he searched through his memories. Then, what was going on? "What are you looking at?" the boy asked again. Yin Yang was taken aback, slightly confused. What are you looking at?" The child answered, "Can't you see? I'm reading a book." Yin Yang asked, "Reading a book? What book?" Yin Yang asked. "Do you want to read as well?" Yin Yang thought about it and said, "If I do, can you show me?" The child smiled innocently and said, "Sure, come and see." Yin Yang did not move. "What's your name?" The boy answered, I'm 75. 75? Yin Yang was stunned. Chapter 1449. How could such a fair-skinned and jade-carved little boy, whose words were well-organized and his mannerisms well-grounded, have a name like 75? How could 75 be considered a name? 75? Why are you called 75? I'm 75th in my family. The little boy smiled innocently. The more one looked at his little face, the more it looked like a ripe little apple. It was bright red and very cute. Yin Yang's eyes widened as he praised from the bottom of his heart. Then your parents are really amazing. As a beginner who really wanted to understand the ways of the world, but had never understood the ways of the world, his obsession with certain things was very terrifying. What are parents? The little boy asked curiously with his big round eyes. The sudden question made Yin Yang feel that he could not answer it. What were parents? You don't even know about this? Who raised you? Who gave birth to you? Yin Yang asked. There's no one. The little boy bit his little finger and said innocently, no one raised me, and no one gave birth to me. Yin Yang instantly felt that the tiny child in front of him was just too perceptive. A few more words and it would become difficult to communicate with him. There was always a difference in logic between a child and an adult. The sentence that was already at the tip of his tongue, where are your parents? It was forcefully swallowed back into its stomach. After all, this little fellow didn't even know his parents, so how could he have any adults? Then how did you get here? How would I know? The little boy said, it's my first time here too. This place looks so bright. It's a good place. The little boy's eyes were filled with love for this space. Yin Yang turned to take a look. The 6th level of Supreme Heaven Pavilion could be said to be the narrowest space he had ever seen so far. The light in it was rather dim, and there was even fog that blocked one's vision floating in the air. How could such a place be bright? How could it be a good place? Should I say that this child is too easily satisfied, or that he has no ambition? This book in my hand, do you want to read it? The little boy raised the book in his hand as if he was showing off. Yin Yang looked over and saw that the book was black in color. There were words written on it, but he could not read them clearly. Just as he was about to focus his eyes to get a better look, the boy suddenly kept the book away and said, right, can you do me a favor? Do you a favor? What is it? Yin Yang was stunned again. Conversations with the boy were always unexpected and unexpected. The little boy said hopefully, when I grow up, I want to travel around. But now, nobody wants me to play in their world. Do you want me to play in your world? My world? Play. Yin Yang was getting more and more confused by the boy's explanation. At this moment, he was at a complete loss. Yes. The boy looked at Yin Yang with his clear, innocent eyes. I hope you can promise me to play in your world. If I can't go anywhere, I'll die. He looked at Yin Yang pitifully. Are you willing to help me? Yin Yang said cautiously, I don't understand what you mean. I can't promise you anything. The world that I'm in doesn't belong to me alone. During the selection of Supreme Heaven Pavilion, a child like this had suddenly popped up in the 6th level and his words were strange. Yin Yang would not believe that there was nothing going on here. Therefore, although he had repeatedly confirmed that the person in front of him was indeed a child, he did not let his guard down. Instead, it was unprecedentedly heavy. He would not make any promises easily. Oh, you're so stupid. The boy pursed his lips in dissatisfaction. The others won't let me go, but if I don't go when the time comes, I'll die. Don't you understand? Yin Yang frowned. It's better not to do things you don't understand. You said that no one raised you, then how did you grow so big? How did you grow so big? When he said the words grown so big, Yin Yang somehow felt that he could not bring himself to say it. To say to a 3-year-old child, you've grown so big, did not sound right. It was easy to say, but it did not sound nice at all. The little boy curled his lips and said, "That's how long I was." That mountain was full of black fog, and there was enough black fog. After a long time, a heart would form, and after a long time, a black egg would form. After a long time, I would come out of the egg. That's how everyone came to be. We're all like this. I'm the 75th. The boy seemed to be very proud of his origin, but he also seemed to be very proud of what he had said. Yin Yang clicked his tongue in wonder and asked, "Everyone's circumstances are similar. How do you know that you're the 75th? Not the 76th or the 74th? The boy said, "This can't be wrong. I know it. Before I even hatched, I already knew that I'm the 75th. No, not the 76th, not the 74th. No egg hatched." Yin Yang's heart skipped a beat as another key phrase in the boy's words flashed across his mind. Wait, the hill is full of black fog? Time becomes a heart? If it's too long, it'll become an egg? If it's too long, it'll come out, the 75th? Could it be that this little fellow is actually a spiritual creature of creation that was naturally formed by heaven and earth? Yin Yang looked at the boy again, scrutinizing him from head to toe. Indeed, there was a black mole between the boy's brows. There was one on each side of his brows, reflecting each other but not ruining his appearance. At first glance, there seemed to be nothing special about these two moles. However, upon closer inspection, one would feel as if they were connected to the myriad worlds in the universe. In spite of this, Yin Yang felt as if his entire being was about to sink into it after focusing on it for a moment. However, Yin Yang's state of mind was strong. With a single thought, he had already pulled his attention away. When he looked at the innocent boy again, there was only a tumultuous wave of shock in his heart. The birth of heaven and earth, the creation of spiritual creatures. What did this mean? Why don't others let you play in their world? Aren't they willing to make things easier for you? Yin Yang asked cautiously. I don't know either. The boy said in distress, I think my 74 brothers might have caused trouble for others when they went out. With that in mind, they won't let me go. Will you cause trouble? Will you cause trouble for me? Yin Yang asked again. I'm very obedient. I won't cause trouble, so of course, I won't cause trouble. The boy lifted his face excitedly, trying his best to show his cuteness. However, Yin Yang saw another scene. The process was similar, but the result was the same. In the blurry image, a young man dressed in white stood tall, facing the boy. The boy asked, Can I go to your world to play? Can you make things easier for me? The white-clothed youth was about to answer, but for some reason, his face suddenly turned pale, and he roared, No. The boy was disappointed, his head hung low. The image ended. Then, a young man dressed in green appeared. The boy asked, Can I go to your world to play? I promise I won't cause trouble. Can you make things easier for me? The young man's gaze went blank, his grace gone as he blurted out, No. After hearing the little boy's request, more than a dozen young men chose to reject him. The image ended there. What left the deepest impression on Yin Yang was what one of the young men had said, You're causing trouble over there and I can't control it. I'll give you convenience, but my world has to bear a great risk. Who can guarantee that? The boy's expression darkened bit by bit as he was repeatedly rejected. As the images faded away, the boy dared not look at Yin Yang anymore. He only lowered his head and murmured, Big brother, can I go to your world to play? Can you make things easier for me? Yin Yang was only thinking about one thing. He couldn't control it. Why couldn't he control it? How could he not control a little boy when he was already at the level of a saint and now that his cultivation base had improved further? Bao Er, the little boy from back then, had grown into an adult. Even though he had committed many perverse acts and caused countless troubles for the sake of the emperor's hegemony, with his return, everything had returned to its original state. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't care about it, rebuilding the universe was just a matter of a few words and a wave of his hand. Now, another young boy was asking him to make things easier for him. Should he give it to him? What kind of world is my world? Which world is it? The world I was born in or the world I'm living in now? Yin Yang asked. The meaning of his words was obvious. The world he was born in was Tianxian continent, while the world he was living in was the world he was living in. Yin Yang had to at least know where this boy's goal was before he could decide what to do next. Unexpectedly, the boy's answer surprised Yin Yang once again. His clear eyes were round and round. It's the world you've created. The world I've created? What kind of nonsense is that? Have I ever created any world? We can feel whose world is bigger. Only a bigger world has a place to stand and a place to stay. Your world is very, very big. It's the biggest I've ever seen. The boy was rather dejected. Actually, I didn't dare look for you previously. I looked for those that weren't that fun, those that weren't too big, but they all rejected me. No one made things easier for me. You're not going to reject me too, are you? What if I don't let you go too? Yin Yang asked. The boy was disappointed. If you don't open the door, I can't go. I can only wait for death, he said. What if I let you go? Yin Yang chuckled. The boy's eyes shone as he lifted his head and said excitedly, then I'll owe you. Owe me. Yin Yang began to ponder again, weighing the pros and cons mainly. He was calculating the possible losses. Yin Yang did not consider how much he would get in return. Just like when he met the deities of God's tomb that day and returned God's bones, his original intention was not to repay the favor. Now that he had opened the door for the boy, it was easy to agree to it, but how much damage would he cause later on? How much damage could a child cause? With his current strength, what kind of loss could there be that he couldn't bear? Just as he was mulling over whether to reject the boy or not, an inexplicable thought suddenly turned into a monstrous wave, crashing into Yin Yang's mind without warning. All of Yin Yang's thoughts coalesced into one at that moment. Reject him. Reject him. Reject him. Yin Yang's expression changed abruptly as he felt an excruciating pain in his head. The pain was so intense that it drowned Yin Yang like a tsunami. Yin Yang had once thought that after going through the trial of the million saber strikes in the 5th level of Supreme Heaven Pavilion, his willpower, determination had all advanced to the ultimate state of perfection. He would no longer be shaken by any external force, nor would he be affected by any pain. However, at this moment, this encounter told him that he was wrong. The agony he was feeling now was unprecedented, an extreme agony that life could not bear. In his mind, it was as if there were billions of ghosts wailing and wailing at the same time. At the same time, there was a clear feeling that came at the same time: reject him. As long as you reject him, you won't feel any pain. Yin Yang did not know that his expression now was exactly the same as the faces of the other youths he had seen when the boy had been rejected. Pale. It was so white that it had lost all color. The boy closed his eyes. His face was filled with disappointment and despair. After experiencing the agony, the answers of the dozens of young men were all, without exception, no. This big brother in front of him was the last one. As the agony washed over him, the boy saw Yin Yang's expression change. Then, his own expression changed as well. Although he was still looking at Yin Yang with hope in his eyes, his gaze was more gloomy than anything else. It was happening again. Previously, so many big brothers suddenly had a headache at this time, and then they all rejected. Would this big brother be an exception? If this big brother rejects me too, then I really have no one to ask. No one to ask. It means that there is no world to go to. Then, I will die in a few years' time, should he agree or not. The agony was like a tidal wave, washing away Yin Yang's consciousness. Billions of voices were screaming incessantly. Reject him. Reject him. Yin Yang gritted his teeth, his entire body drenched in sweat. After going through the previous few levels, even the pain that an ordinary person could not bear was merely a joke to Yin Yang. Therefore, Yin Yang had great confidence in the level of pain that he could withstand. However, the headache he felt at this moment was several times more severe than the previous few tests combined. Yin Yang felt that his consciousness had been shattered into a starry sky, almost out of his control. After a long, long time, it was only then that Yin Yang finally felt his consciousness recovering a little. He endured the excruciating pain and opened his eyes a slit, only to see the helpless look on the boy's face, his gaze hollow. No one could withstand such agony. Just one word of refusal could end this pain, so who would choose to refuse? The boy had lost all hope. After too many times of disappointment, the last attempt had turned his disappointment into despair. The hollow gaze made Yin Yang's heart skip a beat. Hesitation rose in his heart before an even more intense pain turned into the voice of Tao that shook him. Reject him. Reject him. The voice of Tao was asking him to reject him. However, Yin Yang's last thought was clear. He felt that he should say yes. It was an extreme contradiction. There was only a sliver of Yin Yang's lucidity. He knew that he could no longer withstand this deeper level of pain. He had to make a decision. With all his might, he resisted the command of the voice of Tao and roared, "I'll give you this chance." Even if he regretted it in the future, he could do as he wished now and not follow the forceful interference of the voice of Tao. If you hadn't interfered, I might have rejected you naturally. However, since you've interfered, I must say yes. The agony intensified tenfold, forcing Yin Yang to shut his mouth. Before his consciousness exploded, Yin Yang roared again, "I promise you that I'll open the door for you and let you go to my world." The boy who was still sitting behind the study table had a radiant glow in his initially disappointed and hollow eyes. With a cheer, he jumped up abruptly. "Thank you, big brother." Then, a beam of light emitted from the boy's body and swiftly disappeared from Yin Yang. The excruciating agony did not subside because of the boy's gratitude. Instead, it surged even more violently, as if it was a vengeful punishment. Yin Yang did not make a sound as he slowly fell to the ground. All of his consciousness had vanished in an instant. The last thing he felt was that his body and his consciousness had been divided into thousands of individuals, each of them suffering excruciating agony. He lay quietly on the ground, enduring it in silence. The boy in front of the study table cast a grateful gaze at him and murmured, "Thank you, big brother." Then, the young body turned into black light bit by bit and gradually disappeared. "I'll remember you." Just as he was about to vanish completely, a book flew out with a sudden force. Pa! The book fell to the ground. In the next moment, the boy disappeared, the study table and the small stool vanished as well. Only the black book quietly fell to the ground. "I've had diarrhea for half a day after eating a barbecue." You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.